I was digging through the garage last weekend, trying to find my old fly fishing gear for a trip I'd half-promised my coworker. Among the dusty crates stuffed with faded holiday decorations and forgotten photo albums, I stumbled on a box labeled with my son's name, Tyler, 1995 to 2005. I figured it was a time capsule of his childhood, maybe old drawings, broken Hot Wheels, and the like. Instead, tucked between his Little League certificates and school art projects was a hospital form. At first glance, it looked like a routine medical statement for blood work, dated nearly 2 decades ago. But then I saw Tyler's blood type, AB. That wouldn't have startled me if I hadn't also noticed the father's listed blood type. Oh, mine. I've been an O+ my whole life. My parents drilled that into me early because they donated blood regularly, so it was practically a family ritual. Everyone knows an O+ father can't produce an AB child. Yet there it was, black and white, proclaiming my impossible contribution to Tyler's existence. The garage felt stifling after that discovery, like the world shrank around me. I actually called up my longtime buddy Carl, who happens to be a doctor in Dallas, just to confirm I wasn't mixing up my high school biology. He took about 2 seconds to say, "Henry, if this test is accurate, genetically speaking, you're not Tyler's father." I can't remember the exact words I used, but I'm sure half of them aren't fit to print here. A little voice in my head tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a hospital mix-up or an administrative typo. But come on. Who was I kidding? I might be an engineer by trade, but I'm not an idiot. I decided not to tip Sandra off just yet, but I did some quiet digging. That's how I found an unusual entry in our shared email account. Well, more like a leftover cookie session in our browser. It showed an anonymized request to 23andMe for advanced paternity data, initiated under what looked like a fake name. The sender was definitely my wife's personal email address, but disguised behind some third-party mask. Seeing Sandra's little digital signature hidden there felt like an ice pick through my gut. If she was so interested in these tests, why wouldn't she mention anything to me? I tried to keep my cool over the next few days. It's a miracle I didn't fling that hospital form in her face the moment I walked inside. But something about her sweetly saying, "Henry, you look stressed. Work getting to you again?" made me want to blow the lid off right then and there. Instead, I played dumb, told her I might have a late shift at the plant. Meanwhile, I had one single question pounding in my skull. If Tyler isn't mine, who the hell does he belong to? The sheer audacity of discovering this in my own garage, like she'd practically gift-wrapped her secret for me to find, made my blood boil and my head spin. I can't call it heartbreak exactly. It was more like a switch flipped from confusion to suspicion in the span of one afternoon. And I knew I had to keep my game face on, because if Sandra went to the trouble of using a fake name for 23andMe, she probably had other tricks up her sleeve. A few days after my initial discovery, I found myself hunched over Sandra's laptop under the pretense of fixing her glitchy email. She keeps all our tax records meticulously saved in neat folders, part of her image as the organized, responsible spouse. But I spotted an odd line on her latest return. Multiple transfers made out to a consulting fund in Miami, recurring every quarter. The line item read, "Genetic counseling, medical expenses." My heart kicked up about 10 notches. Genetic counseling? And in Miami, of all places? I'll admit, anger nearly got the best of me right then. A big part of me wanted to stand up and march into our living room, wave the screen in her face, and demand a confession. But after seeing that phony 23andMe request, I realized a blow-up confrontation wouldn't serve me well. She'd just spew more lies, maybe accuse me of invasion of privacy, her favorite new pastime. So I took a deep breath and forced myself into a calmer, colder mind frame. I'm an engineer and we're trained to troubleshoot step by step, not blow up the whole system at once. So that's what I did. I took screenshots, I noted the amounts, and I made sure to keep a secure backup on a USB drive locked in my desk at work. There was no way I was letting her bury this. That evening, I crafted a fake email from the Sunrise Genetic Wellness Center in Miami, forging their letterhead with a quick bit of Photoshop. The message was short and sweet. A polite thank you for your continued trust in our services and a confirmation of her last appointment date. I signed it with a fictional name, Dr. R. Alvarez, someone I assumed wouldn't raise suspicion if she tried to look them up quickly. Then I sent the email to Sandra's account with a subtle nudge. Looking forward to our next follow-up with you and Tyler, keeping healthy families healthy. I figured she'd either freak out quietly or try to hide it from me. Either way, it would force her to respond, maybe even slip up. When I casually asked her how her day was later that night, she gave me a tight-lipped smile, fiddling with her phone like a teenager. "Works fine, Henry. Stop hovering. Don't you have your big project due soon?" she sniped, a hint of annoyance slipping out. I played dumb, apologized for being overbearing, and watched her bristle. The woman was practically exuding guilt. Anyone else might have chalked her mood up to stress, but I knew better. Lately, her eyes dart around whenever I enter a room, like she's calculating how long until I ask about something. She must suspect I'm snooping, but she has no idea I'm 10 steps ahead. The next morning, before heading to the office, I made a point of checking the sent folder on our home computer. Bingo! She'd forwarded that bogus clinic email to someone else with a frantic note. "What do I do about this? Did you confirm the new appointments?" That alone told me everything I needed. Whoever got that message had some stake in Tyler's genetic situation, and it sure as hell wasn't me. The cold anger that had been simmering morphed into a razor-sharp focus. Gone was the heartbreak or the naive hope that maybe it was all a big misunderstanding. We were dealing with a well-orchestrated cover-up, probably years in the making. I stuffed my laptop and that suspicious tax form into my briefcase, feeling like a spy in my own home. Ironically, Sandra breezed by on her way to spin class, tossing out a half-hearted, "You look exhausted, dear. Maybe get some rest." Right? Classic misdirection right out of her manipulative playbook. I forced a tight grin, thinking, "You have no clue how close I am to cornering you." By the time I pulled out of the driveway, I was already planning my next move. If I could get more data from that clinic in Miami, maybe I'd find a record tying Sandra and Tyler, and possibly a third party to these visits. If she was brazen enough to list them on her taxes, there must be a legitimate paper trail somewhere. And with my skill set, forging a simple letter was just the beginning. I nearly blew a gasket when I stumbled onto the Meet Our Team page on Sandra's company website. I'd been poking around online, trying to figure out which department might be linked to that Miami clinic. Then I saw the group photo, all of them in their starched business casual attire, beaming with the forced camaraderie of a corporate PR shot. There was Sandra in the middle, smiling like someone with nothing to hide. But what really got my blood boiling was the guy standing next to her, labeled Jack, our biotech guru. He wore these rectangular frames that looked suspiciously like Tyler's, right down to the thick black rims and that same subtle way they slipped down his nose. Maybe it sounds absurd to focus on something as small as a pair of glasses, but I swear I saw Tyler's face superimposed on this so-called Jack. Same cheekbones, same stance. My heart pounded so hard I could practically hear it echoing off the walls of my study. My initial reaction was raw fury, a vision of me walking into their sleek corporate office and slamming that website printout onto her desk. But anger only gets you so far. Once the dust settled in my head, curiosity kicked in. Who is this Jack, and why does he seem like a blueprint for my own son's features? I started digging deeper. My skill set might be engineering, but rummaging for digital breadcrumbs is second nature to me. Turns out Jack had published a series of research articles on advanced genome editing and personalized medicine. His name popped up on multiple biotech forums. The more I read, the more it felt like he was practically bragging about his expertise in genetic lineage and DNA mapping for future generations. Remember that 23andMe data I uncovered? I still had partial access to the results. Tyler's DNA report contained a set of markers identifying certain predispositions. Nothing out of the ordinary for an 18-year-old kid, but it was enough for me to try an amateur analysis. Lo and behold, some of the exact sequences Jack boasted about in his professional papers matched suspiciously with the patterns in Tyler's results. Sure, the specifics weren't spelled out in neon lights, but enough pieces lined up to stir the pot of my suspicions. It was like reading a puzzle only half solved, yet the shapes were eerily familiar. I started to wonder, was Tyler literally a walking advertisement for Jack's biotech prowess? It sounds insane, but given everything I discovered, Sandra's hidden genetic counseling payments, that shady 23andMe request, Tyler's AB blood type, Jack now seemed like the missing piece in this twisted jigsaw. My mind replayed every mention of mom's office friend that Tyler ever let slip. Sandra had occasionally name-dropped a certain colleague who had a knack for biology, but I'd never pinned a face to the name until now. The worst part was realizing just how brazen this all might be. Sandra wasn't sneaking around with some nobody. She'd latched onto a biotech specialist, presumably to orchestrate the perfect covert paternity scenario. And I'd been the clueless stooge paying the mortgage, raising a kid who, if my worst fears were true, wasn't even mine genetically. Don't get me wrong, Tyler is still my son in every way that counts emotionally. But this duplicity was like a punch to the gut. I saved every piece of Jack's research I could find, archiving them in a personal folder labeled Project Redwood on my hard drive. My little code name to keep it off Sandra's radar. The DNA data, the references to advanced genome mapping, his academic papers on paternal gene matching, it all fit. I felt this cold sense of purpose coiling in my stomach. Gone was the raw, scorching anger. Instead, I was plotting meticulously, hunger gnawing at me for more information. I made a note. Compare Tyler's full genome to Jack's published cases. I had enough to sense the parallels, but I wanted incontrovertible proof, the sort of data you can't deny in a face-to-face confrontation. Because once I cornered Sandra and her biotech buddy, I wanted their lies pinned to the wall with no escape. I was staring at our home security dashboard late one night, telling myself I was just running a routine check. Truth was, my nerves had me poking at any digital shadow I could find, desperate for a clue that might confirm, one way or another, that I wasn't going insane. We'd installed a high-end system a few years back, complete with network monitoring and motion sensors. It was supposed to protect us from outside threats. Turns out the biggest threat was lurking inside these walls. As I navigated the logs, something strange stood out. Numerous encrypted connections from Sandra's phone in the dead of night. Each was routed through a VPN, cleverly masking the destination. My stomach sank. She clearly didn't want me tracing her calls. Why else go to such lengths? Sure, business people often use secure channels for work, but these timestamps were after midnight on weekends. Not exactly typical office hours. I managed to decrypt just enough metadata to pinpoint a suspicious geolocation near Dallas, Fort Worth, specifically in a suburban neighborhood known for pricey houses and well-manicured lawns. With a bit more cross-referencing, alright, maybe more than a bit, I connected that address to none other than Jack. If I'd held any slim hope this was all just a misunderstanding, it evaporated right then. She was calling him late at night, under layers of digital camouflage, from our own living room couch while I was upstairs trying to read or nod off. The betrayal hit me like a sucker punch, leaving me in a momentary haze of despair, questioning everything about the past 2 decades. But that despair only fueled me further. I decided to set a trap, a controlled test to confirm exactly what she was hiding on that phone. Maybe part of me wanted her to slip up, to actually confess so I wouldn't have to keep pretending I didn't see the truth barreling at me. Instead, I drafted a bogus cybersecurity update message that looked like it came from our home security provider. I wrote something official sounding about vulnerability patches and device synchronization, urging her to log in immediately and follow a link to verify that her phone and laptop were up to date. Naturally, I embedded hidden code in that link that would give me remote access to her devices. Nothing too invasive, just enough to mirror her notifications and call logs. It was the digital equivalent of leaving an unlocked trapdoor in her phone's software. I felt a bit grimy doing it, like stepping over some moral boundary. But then I remembered the meticulously covered tracks, the suspicious payments to that Miami clinic, and the hospital form that basically said I couldn't possibly be Tyler's biological father. If she'd stooped this low, I wasn't about to fight fair. I clicked send and waited, heart pounding. Within minutes, the system showed she'd opened the message. My phone buzzed, confirming the stealth installation was live. She had no reason to doubt it. I've been the household tech guru for years, always telling her when we need to update anti-spyware or reset the router. From the next room, I heard her mutter, "Ugh, why now?" Then a few taps on the screen. She probably assumed it was just another one of my "Honey, did you do the updates?" rituals. Once the link took hold, I could practically hear my own pulse pounding in my ears. Any notifications or calls she made would be replicated on a private server I'd set up. It was my window into the heart of her subterfuge. If she was brazen enough to call Jack again, I would see it, and more importantly, I'd have proof. I wish I could say confronting the possibility of Tyler's true paternity was the worst of it, but the idea that Sandra and Jack were casually chatting late at night made my blood simmer. Despair was still there, sure, but it morphed into a steely resolve. I felt like a cornered animal, instincts kicking in to either curl up and weep or sink my teeth into the problem and refuse to let go. Clearly, I chose the latter. If she was going to keep me in the dark, I'd light up her secrets with every technical trick up my sleeve. Because once I had everything lined up, I'd make sure she couldn't spin this into yet another manipulative mind game. A few nights ago, I came home from work later than usual, hoping to avoid any awkward small talk with Sandra. She was already asleep, or at least pretending to be, so I grabbed the mail pile on the kitchen counter. Right away, a thick envelope caught my eye. My name scrawled in ink, return address from some law office I'd never heard of. Usually, we see the same few attorney names for corporate or real estate business. This was someone entirely new, and that made my gut churn. I opened it right there in the dim light of the kitchen. Inside was a copy of a prenuptial agreement, dated exactly 1 month before our wedding. I nearly dropped the pages when I read the part highlighted in neon yellow. Exclude any claim to the child in the event of divorce. I felt my pulse hammering, my head spinning. My first instinct was denial. Did we even have a prenup? We talked about it once or twice in passing, but we both decided it wasn't necessary. Or so I thought. The date on this draft told a different story. Everything in me wanted to tear it up and pretend I'd never seen it. But the more I skimmed, the more it became clear. The entire agreement was tailored around some carefully planned scenario, painting me as a future ex-husband with zero rights to a child. And not just any child, my child. Tyler. Like he was an afterthought or, worse, someone else's legal liability. Every line felt like a viper's bite, but the real venom came when I saw a scribbled note on the last page. Approved by Jack. Who the hell was he to approve anything in my marriage? If I'd been furious before, that was just a prelude. This was betrayal on a completely new level. Sandra setting up a safety net so I couldn't claim paternity, should the truth ever come out. And she'd roped in her biotech puppet, who presumably had the inside track on Tyler's DNA. It was a nauseating thought, that my wedding vows had been overshadowed by some legal trick to keep me in the dark. I could practically imagine Sandra waltzing into that law office with her pristine business suit, sweetly explaining, "We just want to protect each other financially. Oh, and a child might not be biologically his, but let's keep that hush-hush." My hands shook. I wanted to confront her on the spot, wake her up and demand an explanation. But the deeper my anger burned, the more a different emotion crystallized: vengeance. I'd poured half my life into building a home, a career, a future with Sandra. All the time she'd said, "Henry, you're my rock," or, "I'm so proud of what we have." It now felt like a twisted script she'd rehearsed. For the first time, I understood exactly how ruthless she could be. So I swallowed my fury and walked into my study, letter in hand. She might have thought she covered her tracks, but she left a neon-lit trail instead. If Jack had a say in the prenuptial terms, then it wasn't just an affair, it was a premeditated con. I scanned every page of that contract into my encrypted files, along with the note bearing his name. A lesser man might have let the rage eat him alive. But I was done letting my emotions cloud my actions. I decided I'd strike back, surgically and without mercy. Because Sandra, and whoever else she roped into this twisted plot, deserved to feel the same sense of shock and betrayal. And I would deliver that blow in a way neither of them would see coming. A few days after I found that twisted prenuptial agreement, Tyler casually dropped a bomb on me while we were cleaning out the truck. He mentioned that Uncle Jack had given him some pointers on a biology project. I nearly choked on my coffee when he said it. Uncle Jack. Tyler has never once referred to any man that way, let alone someone from Sandra's office. Trying to keep my cool, I prodded him with innocent questions. What kind of project? Was it for extra credit, maybe about DNA or something? Tyler, none the wiser, shrugged and said, "Just some genetics thing. Mom said Jack's an expert." The whole conversation felt like needles under my skin, but I kept my expression relaxed. I gave Tyler a quick fatherly, "That's cool, buddy," even though my insides were twisting. Later that night, I rummaged through his backpack, looking for any sign of Jack's handiwork. Tucked in the back of Tyler's biology textbook, I found a handwritten note on a little sticky tab. "Thanks for our genes, Jay." My heart dropped into my gut. The wording was so brazen it practically screamed, "I'm your real father." I won't lie. Seeing that note in my own home, in my son's schoolbook, tore me up inside. It was this crushing realization that Tyler might be bonding with the very man who'd stolen my place without me even knowing. But the pain only lasted a moment before it morphed into something colder, sharper. I'd always tried to be the good guy, the supportive dad, the husband who didn't pry too much. Now I realized I had to be ruthless if I wanted the upper hand. At that point, I already had covert access to Sandra's phone logs, but I needed direct evidence of her and Jack discussing Tyler. Something I could whip out later and watch them squirm. When Tyler told me Jack had given him a congratulatory gift for finishing the project, I jumped at the opportunity. Sure enough, it was a fancy piece of tech, a high-end digital gadget that any teen would be excited about. Perfect for my plan. I managed to intercept it before Tyler unwrapped it, under the guise of checking it for viruses. Jack might be the biotech genius, but I know my way around hardware. Within an hour, I'd installed a miniature camera and an audio recording module inside the device casing. It was all stealth black, smaller than a quarter, impossible to spot unless you knew exactly where to look. Once Tyler powered it on, the hidden camera would start capturing everything in the room. The next day, I gave Tyler the gift back, smiling like I was just being the overprotective dad. He beamed, none the wiser, and I felt a pang of guilt. But that was overshadowed by a grim determination. If Jack visited our house or even coaxed Tyler into private chats about their genes, I'd have it all on tape. I didn't tell him anything about the camera, of course. Why risk letting Sandra or Jack catch wind? Seeing Tyler's excitement made the whole thing even more twisted. He had no idea he was caught in the middle of a high-stakes betrayal. Meanwhile, Sandra brushed by him and said something about, "Thank Uncle Jack next time you see him," as if the man wasn't systematically ripping our family apart. My chest tightened, but I forced a grin, letting her think I was none the wiser. As I closed Tyler's bedroom door later, hearing him chat away to a friend about his new gadget, I knew I'd crossed a line. But in my mind, it was a necessary step. Because the next time Uncle Jack decided to play father figure, every word would be recorded. And once I had enough proof, I planned on making both him and Sandra regret every calculated lie they'd ever told. Scrolling through social media profiles had become my late-night obsession. Since the house was quiet and Sandra seemed to have suspiciously fewer work emergencies to attend to, it was my best shot at finding new crumbs of evidence. One evening, I stumbled on the Instagram account of a young woman sharing the same last name as Jack. Turned out to be his daughter, Emily. Most of her feed was the typical college kid stuff. Beach selfies, parties, motivational quotes. But one post featuring a sparkling golf trophy caught my eye. The caption read, "Congrats, Dad. Another round well played." That harmless post led me down a rabbit hole. I discovered a private forum for a ritzy golf club outside Dallas that boasted exclusive membership for corporate elites and passionate amateurs. With a bit of clever digital elbow grease, like resurrecting an old forum login from my engineering days, I gained access. There, I found photo after photo of Jack posing with golf partners, gripping clubs and trophies like he was the next Tiger Woods. My stomach turned when I spotted a particular photo. The date in the corner was just 1 week before Tyler was conceived, and the happy pair in the image? Jack and Sandra, teeing off side by side, smiling like they were on cloud 9. She looked relaxed, leaning into him as though it was the most natural thing in the world. I caught myself gripping the desk so hard my knuckles went white. Disgust. That was my first reaction, plain and simple. They'd made a vacation out of it, clearly. Not only had they found time to sneak around behind my back, they'd done so in broad daylight with a bunch of well-heeled golf buddies probably giving them polite applause. If I'd had any illusions that maybe Sandra was coerced or misled, that picture shattered them. She wasn't in crisis. She was beaming, the prelude to forging Tyler's entire genetic narrative. But after the initial wave of revulsion, an uncomfortable smirk flickered across my face. All right, if these two geniuses were going to flaunt their little love fest on the 18th hole, I'd meet them at their own game. Maybe even drive a hole-in-one right through Jack's corporate facade. I decided to send him a gift that would combine the twisted truth with a hefty dose of public humiliation. It took me all of 3 clicks to design a trophy online, bright and shiny, emblazoned with Best Lover of the Year in gaudy bold letters. Underneath the main inscription, I added a classy line of engraving, "Jack and Sandra, champion cheaters." I typed in the address for Jack's office at Sandra's company, paid for expedited shipping, and sat back with a twisted satisfaction. Just imagining the front desk receptionist or some unsuspecting intern delivering that package to him was enough to make my lip curl into a grin. Admittedly, it wasn't the most mature move I've ever made. But at this point, subtlety was getting stale. I needed them to sweat, even if just a little, before I hit them with real, unassailable evidence. That photograph from the golf club was the final puzzle piece that confirmed just how long they'd been at this. They'd planned to conceive Tyler, my own son, during what was supposed to be just a business trip. I sat there, rereading the forum post about their triumphant golf score. The irony was too thick to ignore. While I'd been slogging away at my engineering projects to give our family stability, Sandra was busy perfecting her swing with the real father of my child. And now, thanks to modern shipping, Jack would have a literal trophy to commemorate his performance. I just hoped he had the decency to display it proudly on his desk. I'd been itching to break into Sandra's corporate digital environment for a while, but the opportunity finally presented itself when their HR department announced a company-wide IT security audit. There's something especially fitting about turning a real threat into my personal backdoor. They were already gearing up for a mandatory cybersecurity check, so I slid right in, masquerading as an external IT specialist. Most employees, busy glancing at endless spreadsheets, probably just clicked, "I agree," on the pop-ups without reading them. Sandra's team was no exception. I set up a decoy site for a so-called corporate loyalty and phishing awareness test. The official-sounding email I sent read, "Dear valued employee, please demonstrate your commitment to secure practices by logging into our platform. Non-compliance may result in a review of your position." A touch heavy-handed. Sure, but fear is a hell of a motivator. Within hours, nearly everyone in Sandra's department had taken the bait, handing me direct access to their private Slack-style chat rooms. The stuff people spill in those closed channels can be downright incriminating, and that's precisely what I was hoping for. I found a half-dozen chat groups where Jack and Sandra's names popped up like clockwork. The tone among their colleagues was disturbingly cavalier. One user typed, "Hey, anyone else notice that Jack and Sandra always vanish at lunch together?" Another chimed in, "I wonder who's teaching who," followed by winking emojis. Then came the line that made me physically recoil from my screen. "Jack and Sandra, our power couple, #office goals." The misspelling of her name didn't bother me as much as the sickening glee behind it. They might as well have posted a giant neon sign confirming that these two were inseparable, intimately or otherwise. What struck me was just how casual everyone seemed about it. These so-called professionals joked about Jack and Sandra's secret synergy, as if the rumor was old news. Was I really the only one clueless enough to miss the signs all these years? My contempt for the entire lot flared. How could they happily watch my wife waltz around the office with another man, all while playing perfect spouse at home? But that resentment swiftly morphed into cold calculation. This was even better than I'd hoped. Multiple screenshots of coworkers blatantly referencing Jack and Sandra's relationship, complete with dates and anecdotes. I cherry-picked the most incriminating lines, compiled them into a neat, damning PDF, and filed it away with the rest of my digital ammunition. One of my favorites was a chat snippet that read, "If they ever break up, the biotech division might implode, lol." It was equal parts pathetic and golden from an evidence standpoint. Of course, I made sure to cover my tracks, wiping the digital footprints of my infiltration. By the time the phishing test concluded, I was safely out, leaving behind a trail that made it look like a routine IT audit. And not a single employee suspected they'd just handed a scorned husband the playbook for their next corporate scandal. Later that night, watching Sandra tap away at her laptop, I had to suppress a sardonic smile. She glanced over, probably wondering why I was so quiet, but I just yawned and shrugged, feigning exhaustion. If only she knew the treasure trove I'd uncovered, her coworkers practically crowning her and Jack as the office's reigning power duo. I thought about how much I wanted to see the look on Jack's face when he realized those playful jabs among colleagues were weaponized, systematically cataloged, and ready for the day I'd pull the pin on his world. I'd be lying if I said I didn't relish every second leading up to that moment. Sure, weddings are supposed to be joyous, especially your own kids, but Tyler's big day presented an opportunity so perfect, so deliciously cinematic, I couldn't resist. We'd rented this pristine country club on the outskirts of Dallas. A grand ballroom, chandeliers glimmering overhead, everything top tier. Nobody would suspect the father of the groom had quietly slipped into the maintenance hallway earlier that morning, laptop tucked under his arm, ready to exploit a vulnerability in the venue's archaic router firmware. I discovered the exploit a week prior, browsing through a cybersecurity forum. The club's Wi-Fi system had never been patched for the kind of infiltration I planned. A few keystrokes, a quick injection of malicious code, and I had remote access to the projector feed. I didn't even need to hide behind some official-sounding IT badge, just had to sweet-talk the janitor into letting me check the signal for the big wedding. It was shockingly easy, which made it all the more satisfying. Fast forward to the reception. The lights dimmed. Everyone expected a lovely slideshow of Tyler's baby photos, followed by some sappy montage of him and his bride frolicking on the beach. Instead, they got my curated reel of dirty laundry, DNA results from the private lab cross-referencing Jack's gene markers with Tyler's. Pictures of Sandra and Jack cozying up at a golf club only a week before Tyler's conception. And the piece de resistance, a crystal-clear audio clip of Jack's smug voice, likely pulled from one of our many accidental recordings. "He's my son. Henry doesn't suspect a thing." The initial reaction was priceless. Gasps, dropped forks, that uneasy murmur sweeping through the crowd. The bride's mother nearly fainted. Tyler stood there in absolute disbelief. He glanced back at me with a silent question etched on his face. Like, "Dad, what the hell is going on?" My heart clenched because I truly didn't want to ruin his wedding. But let's be real. That ship sailed years ago, when Sandra decided to systematically rewrite our family's entire paternity story. Took Sandra a full 5 seconds to register what was happening. I watched her eyes flick to the screen, to me, back to the screen. Her panic and fury played out in real time. First the shock, then the frantic scowl, then her spinning around to see if Jack was there to help her do damage control. The poor schmuck was standing off to the side, sweat beading on his forehead, hands clenching and unclenching at his sides like he was ready to punch the projector right off its mount. Meanwhile, I just stood near the dais with an expression of calm satisfaction. The father of the groom in his pressed suit, looking like an innocent bystander to the technical glitch of the century. Yes, there were horrified gasps from the in-laws, a few outraged curses from Sandra's side of the family, but I kept my composure. Years of engineering taught me to appreciate the payoff when a meticulously planned operation goes off without a hitch. When the audio clip hit that final line, "He's my son," a hush fell over the crowd. Nobody knew whether to keep watching, look away, or start yelling. One or two people scrambled to stop the slideshow, but the system was locked to my remote commands. The screen froze on a giant image of the lab results with a big arrow pointing to paternal match, Jack. I could see the bride's father glaring at me, as if to say, "This is your doing, isn't it?" And he was right. All around us, the wedding staff tried to salvage the situation. Someone rushed the projector to shut it down physically, but not before the final blow. A pop-up text reading, "Proof enough for you, Sandra?" The message lingered for a few seconds before the projector went dark. In the stunned silence, I leaned into the microphone that was still live from the best man's toast and delivered one line. "Congratulations, Tyler. I'll explain everything later." You could practically taste the tension in the air. It was a twisted mixture of shock, betrayal, and awkwardness. Exactly what I'd intended. Sure, Tyler's wedding would be remembered for all the wrong reasons, and a part of me hated causing him such pain on his special day. But another part felt an icy sense of vindication. The people who'd orchestrated this elaborate deceit, Sandra and her precious biotech guru, were now laid bare for all to see. In that moment, with the eyes of the entire room on me, I felt no panic, no second-guessing. Just a cold, clear satisfaction that after all these years of being fed a pack of lies, I finally had the upper hand. And there was no shutting the lid on that Pandora's box. Sandra's face was twisted in fury, eyes locked on me like she wanted to incinerate me on the spot. We were in the side room of the wedding venue, just moments after that bombshell video ended, and guests were still buzzing in the ballroom behind us. Suddenly, she snapped, "This is all your fault. You were never home. Always on some godforsaken project." Her voice echoed, raw with anger. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. She was blaming me for her fling? I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, trying to hide the tremor in my hands. Panic flashed across her face, like she realized her reputation and marriage had just gone up in flames. But me? I felt oddly numb, a cold acceptance settling in. If I'd harbored any lingering doubts about her character, hearing her pivot to blaming me was the final confirmation of who she really was. Amazing, I said, injecting every drop of sarcasm I could muster. All those late nights, the 60-hour weeks, just to fund your little hobby. You're right, Sandra. I should have been here, rolling out the welcome mat for your boyfriend. She jabbed a finger in my direction. Don't act like you're innocent. You think I wanted this? You think I planned to fall for Jack? If you hadn't been so obsessed with climbing the corporate ladder, you would have noticed something was off. Her voice cracked on that last word, an odd mixture of desperation and defiance. I simply shrugged, glancing down at the fancy watch on her wrist, the one I'd given her for our 10th anniversary, engraved with our initials and the date. She wore it religiously, probably because it was so stylish. Little did she know it also housed a discreet audio recorder I'd rigged up 2 months before. With a tap on my phone, I triggered the playback of the one conversation that mattered most. Jack's voice crackled to life. Relax, Sandy. His career is our cover. He's too busy to put 2 and 2 together. My heart clenched at how nonchalant he sounded, like I was some oblivious bystander. Then Sandra's voice. Henry's never around. He just signs the checks and keeps me comfortable. We can handle him. I watched her pupils flare. For a fleeting second, she looked downright feral. She snatched at her watch, as if she could smother the sound by cupping her hand over the speaker. Jack's smug tone kept echoing from the tiny device, unstoppable. The volume was low, but in that small side room, it might as well have been blaring through loudspeakers. You recorded me? How dare you? Her voice shook, but the effect was lost on me. Any pang of regret I might have felt had evaporated. No, I just installed a time-traveling poltergeist, I quipped dryly. Sandra, let's be real. You've been playing me for years. I just caught up. She looked torn between slapping me and bolting out the door. Henry, you have no right. Oh, I have every right. I cut in, letting the mask of politeness slip. I've spent the past 2 decades being the dutiful husband, the doormat who never questioned your little business lunches. She tried again to deflect, tears brimming in her eyes. You don't understand what it was like for me. You were gone all the time. Stop. My tone was pure ice. If you were that lonely, you could have asked for therapy, a vacation together, anything but hooking up with your biotech miracle worker. I was busy providing for this family. Meanwhile, you and Jack were busy rewriting Tyler's genetics behind my back. It was a grim, twisted scene. Us in formal attire, on what should have been our son's happiest day, ripping each other apart with veiled threats and revelations. But I felt no panic, no shame, just a detached sort of calm. Her meltdown was the exclamation point on this entire fiasco, and any sympathy I once had was long gone. She flung off the watch, sending it clattering across the floor. A final burst of defiance. You'll regret this, Henry. I swear you will. I bent down slowly, picked up the watch, and brushed off the dust from the screen. Funny, I murmured. You already look like the one who's regretting it. At that, I turned and walked back toward the ballroom, leaving her trembling with rage. The distant hum of confused wedding guests filled the hall, but it sounded muffled to me, like I was in a vacuum. My anger and hurt had settled into an eerie indifference, because after that final recording, there wasn't a shred of doubt left. This was it. The marriage, the secrets, all of it was dead weight. And if Sandra thought that was the worst of my surprises, well, she clearly didn't know me as well as she believed. The fallout from the wedding fiasco felt like a slow-motion implosion of everything Sandra and Jack had painstakingly built. Word got out within days, partly thanks to an anonymous blog post on LinkedIn titled, Behind Closed Doors, The Biotech Affair, which detailed every salacious twist with unnerving precision. My guess is the blogger had corporate connections. The story went viral among CEO circles, fueling all manner of rumors. Meanwhile, I kept my head low, quietly compiling the final puzzle pieces for my next move. I had volumes of evidence saved on multiple encrypted drives. The recordings of Sandra admitting they used my career as a cover, the chat logs from the office joking about Jack and Sandra, the DNA analysis that practically screamed Tyler was never mine to begin with. When I got wind that Sandra's board of directors at the company was investigating ethical breaches, I sent them a neat, well-labeled file anonymously. The subject line read, Code of Conduct Violations, Evidence Enclosed. Given how squeaky clean Sandra prided herself on appearing, the revelations were like a nuke dropping on their Monday meeting. By Wednesday, she was escorted out of corporate headquarters. Someone leaked that she sat stunned in HR, stuttering while reading the internal memo that spelled out her termination. A little poetic justice, if you ask me. Jack didn't fare much better. His biotech license went under review almost immediately, with the regulatory board citing misconduct involving patient confidentiality and paternity fraud. By the time they finished rummaging through his scientific record, they revoked his license for numerous ethical violations. Poof, his bright biotech future up in smoke. I heard he'd been trying to pivot to another field, but that anonymous LinkedIn blog kept popping up everywhere, staining his name in industry forums. Karma's a twisted thing. Sometimes it lands right where it belongs. As for Tyler, once the initial shock wore off, he confronted Sandra and me in a private talk. No screaming, just hard questions about why we'd kept him in the dark. I told him I was sorry he had to learn the truth so brutally. I never wanted to torch his wedding, but after seeing how deep this betrayal ran, I couldn't stand by silently. He took it like a punch to the gut, of course. The next week, he filed legal paperwork to change his last name to his wife's. Maybe a way to carve out his own identity, unlinked from either me or Jack. That stung in a strange way. Still, I respect the kid's decision. He deserved a clean slate. In the aftermath, I sold the house. Too many memories in those walls. I found a smaller place closer to my job, figuring I could downsize and focus on simpler things. My neighbors whispered behind my back, but I let them gossip. The truth was, I felt a sense of relief. My entire life had been carefully orchestrated around one massive lie, and shining a spotlight on it, devastating though it was, had a strange cleansing effect. Sandra tried to call me a few times, leaving voicemails pleading for one last chance to explain. I deleted every single one without listening. For once, I hold all the cards, and I don't owe her a thing. Maybe it makes me sound vindictive, but after the fiasco she engineered, I'm fresh out of sympathy. I wish I could say I'm riding off into the sunset, morally unscathed, but that'd be too neat a wrap-up. I definitely have regrets about how Tyler's big day turned into a spectacle. And yet, a part of me can't deny the cold satisfaction of seeing Sandra and Jack face the same humiliation and loss that I did times 10. Maybe that makes me no better than they are, but you know what? I can live with that. In the end, I found a strange peace in not having to lie to myself anymore. The skeletons are all out of the closet, rattling for everyone to see. And if people want to judge me for how I dismantled my marriage on my son's wedding day, they can. I spent years playing the unwitting fool. I figure I've earned the right to walk away with my head high, even if the rest of the world sees nothing but the smoke and rubble left behind.
You're not a real man. I need someone who makes me feel alive. That's what she said. No whisper, no tremble, just pure venom in a perfectly modulated voice, like she was reading off a script she'd rehearsed 100 times in her head. I didn't even ask where she was going. I already knew. The suitcase was zipped, her favorite heels were on, and her perfume, not the one I bought her for our anniversary. No, the newer, sharper one, lingered in the air like a punch I didn't see coming. She had this dead calm about her, like someone who'd already mourned the death of our marriage months ago and was just now attending the burial. I stood there in my work boots, smelling like burnt metal and hand soap, while she looked like she was heading to some red carpet event where betrayal was the dress code. And then she walked past me, didn't even flinch, didn't look back. She just opened the door, stepped into the night like it was hers, and let it slam behind her. No car engine, which meant he was picking her up. I didn't look through the blinds. I didn't give her that dignity. I just stood there, in the living room we built together. The same living room where I installed those hardwood floors she insisted on. The ones she said would make the place feel more adult. Funny, now I was apparently not one. There was a fork on the coffee table. Just one. Her plate was already rinsed in the sink. Not washed, just rinsed. She'd been planning this. Everything was cold, calculated. The timing, the delivery, the sheer efficiency of it all. She hadn't packed like someone in a panic. She packed like someone checking out of a hotel she didn't like. I didn't chase her. I didn't say a word. But I'll tell you what did happen. Something shifted. Something cracked. Not in a dramatic, Hollywood way, no screaming, "Why?" into the ceiling, no collapsing to my knees. No, it was quieter than that. It was more dangerous than that. It was the kind of crack that happens in a dam, not loud, not noticeable, but irreversible. You don't see the destruction right away, but it's coming. I walked into the kitchen. The calendar still had her notes for the week. Pick up dry cleaning. Call mom. Dinner with Darren and Elise Friday. I stared at her handwriting. Tiny, controlled cursive. The kind she used on thank you cards. You'd never know those same fingers wrote the last words she said to me with her mouth. You're not a real man. And you know what hit me the hardest? Not that she left. Not that she cheated. Because let's be real. No woman leaves with that much certainty unless there's a safety net waiting. And in her case, it probably had abs, a leased BMW, and a startup that would be bankrupt in 2 years. What hit me hardest was that she didn't cry. Not a tear. After 18 years. Not even when she picked up the photo of us in Maine, the one where we're holding up that ridiculous lobster we caught on the last day. I watched her look at it, expressionless, and then place it face down on the mantel. She didn't cry. So I didn't either. I sat down on the couch, our couch, and stared at the wall. My tools were still by the door. I'd gotten off the job site just 2 hours before. My back was killing me from crawling under a client's busted trailer hitch in 96-degree heat. And now I was here, marinating in the last sentence my wife would ever say to me in this house. And it was that sentence, "You're not a real man," that told me everything I needed to know. Not about me. About her. Because no one who loves you says that. Not even when they're angry. Not even when they're done. That's not a goodbye. That's a bullet. And she wanted me to bleed from it. But I didn't. Not that night. Not right away. Because some men shatter when they hear those words. And some men sharpen. I didn't scream. Didn't curse the sky. Didn't smash plates like some dollar store drama. I just sat. On the porch. All night. In my boots, still covered in dust and metal flakes from the shop. The stars didn't blink. The breeze didn't care. And the crickets chirped like nothing happened. As if a woman hadn't just ripped 18 years out of my chest and walked off like she was late to yoga. Around 3 a.m., I noticed the porch light was flickering. Probably needed a new bulb. Funny how life doesn't stop. Pipes still hum. Air still cools. Even when your whole world just hit a brick wall. At 5:47 a.m., the sun cracked the horizon in that slow orange stretch, and I stood up. My knees popped like bubble wrap. My whole body was stiff, like grief was calcifying inside me. But I didn't feel broken. Not yet. I felt hollow. Like someone had scooped out everything I used to be and left just the frame. So I went inside. Quiet. Controlled. No music. No news. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the soft creak of my own footsteps. First, the living room. That photo wall she curated like a shrine to curated happiness. I took every frame down. One by one. Didn't look at them. Just stacked them in a box. No shaking hands. No sniffles. Just movement. There was one photo. Us in front of the old Dodge when I'd just finished restoring it. Her arms wrapped around me. Big smile. She captioned it on Facebook. My real man with real grease under his nails. I looked at that one a little longer. Then flipped it face down and dropped it in the box. Labeled the box with a Sharpie. Wasn't enough. Then I started cleaning. Not the make it sparkle kind. The surgical kind. I stripped the bed. Washed the sheets. Folded them military tight. Wiped every surface. Bleached the bathroom. Vacuumed under the couch cushions. Even cleaned the stove vent filter, which I hadn't done in years. Because I needed to erase her. Not just her scent. Not just her hairbands or her lotion bottles with the passive-aggressive lavender smell. I needed to scrub the version of me she left behind. The guy who was safe, predictable, and apparently not a real man. At 10 a.m., I stood in front of the mirror. Noticed the gray in my beard. The cracked calluses on my hands. The shoulders that had held up a whole house while she daydreamed about Jaden and whatever motivational poster life he sold her. I looked in my own eyes. And I said, then let's become more. Not louder. Not richer. Not younger. Just more. More deliberate. More dangerous. More undeniable. I wasn't going to rebuild for her. I was going to rebuild because someone out there had decided I wasn't worth keeping. And I couldn't wait to see the look on her face when she realized what she walked away from. No texts. No calls. No pitiful updates. Just silence. And the sound of a man becoming something else. 3 days after she vanished into the night like a bad decision with lip gloss, Terry stopped by, unannounced, which already told me something was up. Terry doesn't do casual. He does 3 beers, 2 awkward laughs, and 1 unavoidable truth. And sure enough, he brought all 3. He showed up with a 6-pack like we were college roommates again. I let him in. No small talk. Just that quiet man-to-man nod. The one that says, let's skip the BS. Yeah? We sat on the porch. The same place I sat the night she left. I hadn't told him what happened. Didn't need to. Word travels fast when your wife runs off like she's starring in her own midlife crisis documentary. He cracked open a can and didn't even sip before blurting it out. She's with Jaden. I blinked once. Jaden who? He gave me this grimace, like he was bracing for my reaction. Jaden Marks. You remember, the guy with the YouTube channel about mindset dominance and protein pancakes or some sh*t. And just like that, the whole damn picture snapped into focus. Jaden. That Jaden. 34. 0 body fat. The kind of guy who calls his own apartment a penthouse, even though it's just a 3rd-floor walk-up with exposed pipes. His business card literally says high-performance financial mentor. He's got more photos of his abs online than he does tax documents. And there it was on cue. Terry pulls out his phone and shows me Jaden's latest Instagram post. He's shirtless, flexing in some rented Lamborghini, with the caption, "A real man gets what he wants. No excuses. No apologies." I didn't flinch. Didn't laugh. Didn't even blink. I just looked at the photo for 2 seconds. And then I smiled. Genuinely. Because now I understood. See, when someone leaves you, your brain immediately tries to figure out why. Was I too quiet? Too steady? Not spontaneous enough? Did I stop making her feel wanted? Needed? Alive? But when you find out she traded 18 years of love, loyalty, and leaky sink repairs for a guy who sells ebooks about manifesting passive income while taking gym selfies and bathroom lighting, suddenly, everything becomes crystal clear. She didn't leave because I wasn't enough. She left because she wanted to be someone else. And needed a human accessory shallow enough to reflect her new fantasy. Jaden wasn't a replacement. He was a costume. And me? I was real. Too real. Too heavy with things that couldn't be posted or filtered. Things like commitment, sacrifice, and silence when it counted. I handed Terry another beer and said, "Thanks for the update." He watched me like he was expecting a breakdown. But all I felt was relief. Because now I knew. I knew she wasn't stolen. She traded down. For something louder. Shinier. Cheaper. And all I had to do now was keep building the man she'd never recognize again. I didn't set out to transform. There was no Rocky montage, no inspiring playlist, no midnight vow whispered into the void. I just got tired of looking like the version of myself she had left behind. And once you realize someone only loved the version of you that made them feel superior, something flips. Day 1 started with coffee. Not the sugary kind I used to drown in at the shop. No, I went black. Bitter. Honest. Like me. Poured it into a chipped mug I'd been meaning to throw out, sat on the back steps, and watched steam rise into the morning like smoke from an old wound finally cooling. Then I hit the gym. First time in 20 years. 6 a.m. No pre-workout. No mirror selfies. Just me, a sweat-stained towel, and a body that reminded me with every stretch that welding and fitness are 2 very different beasts. I didn't lift heavy. I didn't try to impress the trainer with grunts or ego. I just showed up. Every damn morning. 2 weeks in, I noticed something. The soreness didn't hurt like it used to. It felt earned. Like pain with a receipt. And then came the books. Real books. Paper ones. Not articles, not podcasts. I started with biographies, guys who'd built things, lost things, endured things. Not to distract myself, but to remind myself that identity doesn't vanish when someone leaves. It gets uncovered. I bought boots. Not flashy, not trendy, solid, oil-resistant soles. The kind that don't squeak when you walk into a room full of people who still remember your wife's exit like it was a halftime show. Then I cut the beard. 5 inches gone. Left just enough stubble to feel the air again. And the truck, God, the truck. I hadn't detailed it in years. Still had crumbs from her damn granola bars in the glove box. I spent 6 hours on it one Saturday. Buffed it, vacuumed it, scrubbed it down like it owed me rent. By the end, it looked like the first day I bought it. But I wasn't doing this for anyone else. Not for Terry. Not for some imaginary rebound romance. Not even for revenge. I was doing it because I realized something horrifying. I had stopped showing up for myself a long time ago. Way before Marissa ever zipped that suitcase. I let myself become convenient. Comfortable. Predictable. The guy who fixed things, paid the bills, didn't ask too many questions. I wasn't a man. I was a function. And the worst part? She didn't even notice the moment I disappeared. Because convenience doesn't get a thank you. It gets taken for granted. So I started building the man I respected. The kind of man who didn't ask for applause or forgiveness. The kind of man who didn't need her to come crawling back to know he was worth keeping. Because if she ever did crawl back, she wouldn't find the man she walked out on. She'd find someone who looked right through her. And kept walking. 2 weeks. That's how long it took. 14 days of silence. No calls. No texts. Not even a forwarded bill or a rogue. Oops, wrong number. I thought she'd blocked me, honestly. The modern middle finger. Delete. Unfollow. Pretend it never existed. She had always been the type to tidy her messes fast. Emotional Marie Kondo. Discarding anything that didn't spark joy. Apparently, that included me. But then a message. 6:43 p.m. Gray bubble. Unknown number. But I knew that rhythm. Her messages always had this fake lightness to them. Like she was trying to sound casual while balancing a loaded gun behind her back. Hey, hope you're okay, smiley face. No name. No signature. But that smiley face? That was her version of knocking gently on the door she kicked in 2 weeks ago. I stared at it. Didn't respond. Didn't even blink. 6 hours later. I've been thinking, you didn't deserve how I left. That wasn't fair. Still no name. Still no apology. Just this vague, breadcrumb tone, like she wanted me to ask for more. Like closure was some prize I had to beg for. And then, the clincher. Just checking in. Just checking in. As if I was a subscription. As if she could pop her head back in, scan the room, and decide whether the furniture still suited her. I didn't respond. I didn't delete them either. Because I wanted to see who she became without the stage lights. And that woman, the one now cautiously knocking from the outside of a life she used to own, she wasn't Marissa, queen of the narrative anymore. She was just another contact. Another gray bubble. Another was. And me? I was becoming something she couldn't even spell. Something not meant to be texted. Not meant to be accessed by someone who burned the key and now realized they'd locked themselves out. The more I didn't respond, the more those messages trickled in. Each one shorter. Each one quieter. Like even she could feel the grip slipping. She was starting to realize something. I hadn't just accepted the breakup. I had outgrown the version of myself that needed her to regret it. And that was the kind of silence no message could break. I didn't post a thing. No cryptic quotes. No gym selfies. No, on my grind captions with sunrise filters. I just vanished, at least from the places she expected to see me. And in that silence, I built something far louder than words. 18 pounds. That's what I dropped. Not just fat. Weight. The kind you carry when someone you love slowly starts treating you like an obligation. The kind that builds up over years of, I'm fine, and nothing's wrong, and you're just overthinking again. My face sharpened. Jawline reemerged. Shoulders squared. Eyes clearer. Guys at the shop noticed first. Damn, Cole, what? You training for a fight? I just shrugged and kept welding. Didn't need to explain. My body was catching up to the part of me that had been screaming for a reset. But while I got quieter, she got loud. Marissa's feed? A digital fireworks show. Daily posts of her and Jaden smiling like they were auditioning for a reality show nobody asked for. My ride or die heart. New chapter, new car, new me automobile sparkles. When you just know ring. I'd have scrolled past if it wasn't for Terry sending me screenshots with sarcastic commentary. Guess Jaden's car lease finally cleared. She really said entrepreneur and meant part-time crypto pump and dump guy. But what struck me most? The eyes. Marissa always had this spark calculated, sure, but real. Even when she was lying, she made you feel like she believed it. Now, that spark was gone. Her smile was plastic wrapped tight. Her eyes were scanning the camera like they were hoping for approval. Every photo felt like a sales pitch, a performance, like she was trying to convince the world and herself that she'd won. But you can't win if the prize was escape. And you especially can't win if you keep needing the world to notice you're happy. Jaden? Still shirtless. Still quoting himself. Grind now. Glow later. King energy only. Don't chase. Replace. Meanwhile, I was reading Marcus Aurelius and deadlifting more than I had since I was 35. Replacing what, exactly? What struck me, though, wasn't how desperate it looked, it was how predictable it was. She didn't level up. She just amplified. Turned the volume up on the same insecurities she used to whisper in the mirror at night. And the louder she got, the less I felt the need to speak. Because I wasn't building a comeback. I was building a version of myself that didn't need to come back at all. Let her post. Let them kiss. Let them scream, look at us. The real transformation doesn't need a hashtag. 3 months had passed since she torched our life with a smirk and a suitcase. 90 days. 13 gym check-ins a week. 6 books. 1 new wardrobe. 0 responses to her messages. The silence had become a friend, one that didn't need comforting or justifications. Just discipline. Just forward motion. Then, a Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. Elise. Elise never called. She was Marissa's friend first. That's how these things usually go in a breakup. Friends take sides, split custody of brunches and birthdays, go silent. But Elise? She always had her own mind. Darren too. They were good people, blunt, loyal, sharp-eyed. Knew when to speak and when to wait. So I picked up. Hey, Cole, she said. Voice soft, careful. Like she wasn't sure which version of me would answer. Hey, Elise. A pause. Then the inhale, the one people take when they're about to walk across a tightrope with broken glass underneath. We're hosting a dinner next Saturday. Just a few close friends. Darren really wants you there. Another pause. And, look, I wasn't sure if you'd want to come, or if it'd be weird, but I think you should. She didn't have to say it. I already knew. Marissa would be there. So would Jaden. This wasn't just a dinner invite. This was a test. Would I show up and fall apart? Avoid it like a coward? Or walk in like I didn't have anything left to prove? I looked down at my hands. Steady. Calloused. Strong. The man who couldn't even hold himself together 3 months ago was gone. Replaced by someone quieter, meaner, and much, much more deliberate. So I just said, I'll be there. What time should I arrive? She exhaled with a kind of quiet respect. 7. Come early if you want. Bring whatever you're drinking these days. I hung up and stared at the black screen. This wasn't going to be a scene. I wasn't going for revenge. I wasn't going to make a statement. I was going because I didn't need to anymore. And when a man doesn't need anything, that's when everyone starts wondering what he's capable of. I pulled up at 6:50. Didn't park out front. I tucked the truck down the street, under the shadow of an old oak, where the engine wouldn't announce me. This wasn't about theatrics. This was about presence. I wasn't going to walk in like some wounded dog hoping to be acknowledged. I was going to own the air in the room quietly. Black button up, sleeves rolled just enough. No cologne. Just clean. Hair short, tight, with the silver at my temple showing on purpose. Boots polished but scuffed in the right places. Lean, angular frame that didn't beg attention, but didn't apologize either. Elise opened the door before I could knock. Her eyes went wide for half a second, like she expected me to come dressed in grief and regret. Instead, I handed her a bottle of small batch rye and smiled. Figured this would pair well with awkward tension. She laughed too loud, too quickly, but I appreciated the effort. Inside, it smelled like rosemary chicken and new hardwood. Darren had clearly done well since I last saw him. The place looked remodeled. Open. Sleek. No trace of anything old or sagging. We talked tools. I asked about the air compressor setup in his garage. He lit up like a kid at a car show. Elise poured wine and reminisced about the barbecue 4 summers back when the grill caught fire and I dumped a cooler of beer on it like a redneck firefighter. We laughed. Easy. Real. I didn't ask when she was coming. I didn't care. But I knew, somewhere around the second laugh, that she would walk in before the hour turned. And when the door finally clicked open at exactly 7:04, I didn't look up right away. But I felt it. The shift. That ripple of tension that floods a room before a storm. I turned, slowly. And there they were. Jaden walked in first. Tight pants. Blazer with no tie. Overconfident swagger you only get from too many likes and not enough losses. He was scanning the room, probably thinking which corner would best highlight his jawline for a story post. Then came Marissa. And when her eyes landed on me, she stopped. Completely. No step forward. No smile. Just halted. Because she didn't see the man she left. Not the man in a faded Carhartt tee, smelling like acetylene and quiet resignation. She saw something else. Something sharpened. Harder. Heavier. Still. Her lips parted like she was going to say something polite, something casual, something hollow. But nothing came out. Jaden didn't notice. He moved past her, tossing a quick, "Hey man," in my direction like we'd shared protein shakes once. I didn't even answer. I just nodded, one short, cold movement, and turned back to Darren. "Anyway," I said, "you should rewire that entire panel. That breaker setup's a fire waiting to happen." I could feel her eyes on me. Burning. Scrambling. Trying to reconcile the version of me she mocked with the man standing there now, unbothered, unmoved, untouchable. And that's when I knew. She wasn't ready. Not for this room. Not for me. And sure as hell not for the realization that she didn't leave behind a broken man. She left behind the best thing that ever happened to her. And now, he didn't even see her. The laughter in the room dimmed the second they walked in, but no one said it out loud. You know that weird energy people pretend not to notice? That unspoken weight in the air when something enters that just doesn't belong? That was them, Marissa and Jaden, standing in the foyer like they'd just realized the spotlight was now interrogation lighting. Jaden's smile? A little too stiff. The kind of smile a man wears when he knows the armor he's in is rented. His hand reached for hers with urgency, gripped it too tightly, too long. Not affectionate. Possessive. Almost territorial. He looked around like he wanted confirmation that he was winning, that we were all witnessing his victory lap. I didn't give him the satisfaction. Didn't stand up. Didn't fumble a handshake. Didn't perform shock or pretend discomfort. I just looked up once, briefly, and said, evenly, "Good to see you both." Then I turned right back to Darren and said, "So anyway, the compressor you got, did you run it off a 220 line? Or are you playing with fire?" The table exhaled. The way people do when someone else has taken control of the moment so they don't have to. Marissa didn't move for a full 3 seconds. Her eyes still locked on me like I just walked out of her worst-case scenario. She used to complain that I was too still, that my quiet made her feel invisible. Now she couldn't look away. She took a seat across the table. Jaden followed like a shadow, uninvited, ungrounded. The clink of cutlery resumed. Conversations reanimated. Elise passed the salad around, bless her heart, pretending like everything was normal. But I watched her, from the edge of my vision, Marissa. She barely touched her plate, picked at her roasted vegetables like they were fragile bones. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured the wine, sloshed a little on the tablecloth, dabbed at it with a napkin like her whole identity depended on hiding the spill. Jaden tried to crack a joke. Something about the traffic. Took us forever to get here. Marissa made me stop because she forgot her lip gloss. Again. She's always losing things, this one. He elbowed her gently. She laughed. Kind of. A dry, delayed sound. One note too high. Too quick to die in her throat. Everyone at the table gave polite smiles. Elise muttered something about how traffic's been awful lately. Darren took a big sip of wine. I didn't laugh. I didn't smile. I just folded my napkin and set it on my lap with surgical precision. Marissa's eyes darted. She noticed. She was watching. And she saw exactly what she wasn't ready for. I didn't hate her. I didn't pity her. I didn't even care enough to perform for her. And that, more than anything, cracked something in her. Because Jaden came in puffed up, loud, with his faux charisma turned to 11. But suddenly, he started shrinking. Sat a little straighter. Voice a little thinner. Like he could feel that for all his surface charm, he was just a boy who'd been handed a woman he didn't know how to hold. And she? She realized she didn't trade up. She traded away. And now she had to sit across from the man she discarded. while the entire room quietly chose him over the cardboard prince sitting beside her. It was halfway through dinner when the shift happened. The plates were mostly cleared, the second bottle of wine had made its rounds, and the conversations had started to loosen like collars at a wedding reception. Laughter floated across the table. Forks scraped softly against ceramic. For a brief moment, it felt like a normal night with normal people. And then Elise raised her glass. She stood up slow, with that poised, hostess energy she always had, chin high, voice confident, but kind. Everyone looked at her. To the people in this room, she began, her voice soft but clear, and a growth after heartbreak. It landed like a lightning bolt wrapped in velvet. Everyone froze, just a beat too long, before recovering into scattered applause and raised glasses. Darren grinned and clinked his glass against hers. Terry gave a little cheer. But I watched the silence across from me. Marissa didn't move, didn't lift her wine, didn't even blink. Her hand was still on the stem of her glass, but her fingers were stiff, white-knuckled. Her lips parted slightly like she wanted to say something but couldn't decide which version of herself should speak. Jaden, oblivious and already 2 glasses in, leaned toward her and muttered under his breath, just loud enough for me to catch. "What's her problem?" She didn't answer, because her eyes weren't on him. They were locked across the table on me. Specifically, on the woman sitting beside me, Annalise, a friend of Elise's I'd met once or twice before. She was sharp, warm, the kind of woman who could disarm a room with a smirk. And at that moment, she was leaning in, elbows on the table, chin resting on her hand, as I told a story about dropping a wrench through a client's engine bay and having to fish it out with a coat hanger and prayer. She laughed, not a polite laugh, but the kind that tips your head back a little. That kind that says, "I want to hear more." And Marissa saw it. Saw the way Annalise's eyes didn't wander. Saw the way her fingers brushed mine when I passed the pepper. Saw that I wasn't performing, I was just being, and it was enough. For once, I was the gravity in the room. The one people leaned toward. The one who didn't need to prove anything. Jaden, now suddenly aware of the silence beside him, shifted in his seat, cleared his throat. Tried again. "You good?" he asked Marissa. But she still didn't answer, because she was staring at a life that had kept going, evolved, without her. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, but because the space she used to occupy had been filled by something better, something cleaner, real, and for all her posts and proclamations and performance happiness. There was no louder silence than watching me not look at her once during the entire exchange. The room had turned, but I hadn't needed to push it. I just let her feel the weight of being irrelevant in a story that no longer included her. And that, I think, was the first time she realized. She hadn't broken me. She just freed me. Into a world where I was finally seen. After dessert, people began to loosen, the way they do when sugar hits the bloodstream and wine hits the bloodstream harder. Laughter picked up again. Someone brought out that stupid card game with questions you're supposed to answer from the heart. Darren tried to explain the rules, but no one cared. Elise was clearing plates, and Terry was already sneaking second helpings of that chocolate mousse like he was hiding from a food tax. I stood up, offered to help. Elise waved me off with a "sit your handsome self down," and I laughed because it was easier than explaining that I didn't want to be near the table just then. I felt her before I saw her. Marissa. She moved different now. Hesitant. Measured. Like someone crossing thin ice in heels that were too expensive for regret. She waited until the conversation dipped, then made her move. "Cole," she said. Soft. Almost a whisper. I turned, met her eyes. Her lips parted, her breath shallow. She looked like she'd rehearsed it in the mirror 100 times, but still didn't know how to start. "Can we just talk for a second?" There it was. The universal anthem of people who broke something and only realized what it was after someone else picked it up and made it better. Just talk. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I was wrong." Not even, "I miss you." Just talk. The doorknock of guilt dressed in civility. I didn't blink. Didn't fold. Didn't lean in with kindness or bitterness. I just stood there, calm, hands in my pockets, and gave her 5 full seconds of silence to hear the weight of her own voice echo back at her. Then I said, "I hope you find what you're looking for," and turned away. Just like that. No dramatics. No venom. No closure. Because closure is earned, not owed. And what she deserved wasn't another chance. It was a front row seat to everything she walked away from, thriving without her. I walked back to the table, sat down next to Annalise, who passed me the last piece of chocolate tart like she'd been saving it for me. Marissa stayed standing, frozen, like someone who finally reached out and realized there was nothing left to touch. Later that night, I drove home in silence. No radio, no thoughts I was willing to say out loud. Just the steady hum of the engine and the sound of tires carving through pavement like they had somewhere important to be. It was a long drive, not in distance, but in weight. The kind of drive where you replay every glance, every silence, every fork hitting a plate. Where you realize that vindication doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with a quiet so deep, it makes someone else choke on their own noise. I pulled into the driveway, still gravel, still uneven, and sat there with the engine running for a minute longer than necessary. The porch light flicked on automatically, the same light that had flickered the night she left. Funny how something that used to feel dim now felt warm, like it had been waiting for the right man to come back home. I killed the engine, leaned back in the seat, and looked at myself in the rearview mirror. Same eyes. Different man. Not better because I got stronger. Better because I stopped needing to be who she wanted. I didn't become some polished, showy version of success. I became unapologetically whole. And then my phone buzzed. One message. No name. Just an unknown number and a timestamp. 11:41 p.m. You didn't just move on. You transformed. I never knew you like this. No emojis. No desperation. Just raw truth. And that's how I knew it was her. Because only someone who once had access to everything could realize what they threw away when it no longer stood in their shadow. I stared at the message. Not with rage. Not with triumph. Just with the cold clarity of a man who doesn't bleed for ghosts. Then I deleted it. No name. No reply. No trace. Because the only person who ever stood in my living room looked me in the eye and said, "You're not a real man." Just spent an entire night watching a room bend around me without lifting a finger. She watched me laugh, connect, exist too. Not as a comeback story, but as the main character she never had the depth to understand. And in the silence of that deletion, in the echo of her message disappearing into nothing, I realized the strongest version of me was the one who didn't need to be seen. He simply was. And for the first time in years, I didn't just feel like a real man. I felt like a man no one could walk away from again.
The room was alive with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. The annual New Year's party at my company was always a spectacle. Lavish, crowded, and fueled by an open bar that never seemed to run dry. It was the kind of event where people let loose, where secrets teetered dangerously close to the surface before being swallowed back down with another sip of champagne. I stood near the bar, swirling my drink, keeping my face neutral. I had spent years mastering this expression, the one that made me seem approachable but unreadable, calm but always observing. As the founder of an IT security firm, I knew how to read between the lines, how to spot irregularities. I had built a career on recognizing what people wanted to keep hidden. But tonight I wasn't searching for a security breach. I was about to become the victim of one. Amanda was across the room, laughing too loudly at something Jason, the head of sales, was saying. Her posture was impeccable as always, poised, professional, with just enough warmth to appear genuine. She had a talent for making people feel important when she spoke to them, a skill she had no doubt used to climb her way up to chief accountant. It was one of the things that had drawn me to her in the beginning, her ability to command a room with charm alone. I took a slow sip of my drink, watching, waiting. I wasn't entirely sure why I felt that gnawing unease tonight. Maybe it was the way she had been avoiding my gaze, or how she had spent a little too much time adjusting her lipstick before we arrived. Little things, tiny cracks in the foundation of trust one had never fully allowed myself to question. Until now. And then it happened. The moment the room tilted, the music seemed to dim, and time stretched unbearably thin. A voice, slurred from one too many drinks, rang out over the party. "Hey, Nicholas, you ever wonder why your wife spends so much time at the office?" Laughter erupted from the crowd. I could feel dozens of eyes shifting toward me, some amused, some wide with intrigue. But I didn't move, didn't blink. Amanda's smile faltered, only for a fraction of a second, before she recovered. "Come on, David," she laughed, shaking her head. You know better than to listen to drunk idiots. Her tone was playful, dismissive, the same one she used when handling difficult clients. But David wasn't done. He raised his glass, swaying slightly on his feet. Nah, I'm serious. Jason, tell him. Jason froze. His expression barely shifted, but I saw it, the microsecond of panic. The sudden tightness around his jaw. And then, before he could open his mouth to deny it, another voice, one I hadn't expected, cut through the noise like a blade. And he's raising my kid. The air was sucked out of the room. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. I didn't turn my head immediately. I let the moments stretch, let them sweat. The entire room was waiting for my reaction, expecting outrage, a confrontation, a scene. Instead, I took a slow, measured sip of my champagne. Amanda's face had gone completely white. Her fingers trembled slightly as she gripped her glass. Jason looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Brian, the young marketing idiot, had just realized he was the one who had spoken. His face drained of color, his mouth opening as if he could take the words back. Too late. I set my glass down calmly. Interesting, I said, my voice even. Please go on. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Amanda's lips parted, her body rigid. Nicholas, she said softly, carefully, you're not actually taking these ridiculous accusations seriously, are you? I tilted my head slightly. She was good. Even now, with her world crashing down around her, she was trying to manipulate the narrative, trying to plant doubt in my mind, make me look like the paranoid one. I let the silence linger a few seconds too long. And then, without another word, I turned and walked away. She followed. Nicholas, she hissed, her voice low as she caught up to me near the exit. You can't actually think. Go home, Amanda, I said, my voice cold. She blinked. What? I'll see you in the morning. And then I left, because I already knew. I just needed proof. I drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past my windshield. My grip on the steering wheel was firm but steady, just cold, calculated thought. Amanda thought she could talk her way out of this. That was the part that almost amused me. The moment Brian opened his mouth, I saw the way she instinctively shifted into damage control, assessing the situation, calculating which lie would be most effective. She had been preparing for this moment long before it happened. That told me everything I needed to know. I pulled into the driveway, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment, staring at the darkened house. It was ours, or at least it used to be. Now, it just felt like a well-designed illusion, a place built on a foundation of deception. Inside, everything was exactly how we had left it. The Christmas decorations were still up, twinkling softly in the dim light. A picture of us from last year's holiday party sat on the mantel. Amanda in a red dress, smiling up at me, her arms wrapped around my waist. I stared at it for a second longer than I should have before turning away. Upstairs, in the bathroom, I reached for the small DNA test kit I had ordered months ago but never used. I had never wanted to believe I would need it, but tonight had changed that. The process was quick. A simple cheek swab, efficient, unemotional. The hardest part was sealing it in the envelope, knowing what it could confirm. I left it on the counter and exhaled slowly. I wasn't impulsive. That was my greatest strength. Amanda had spent years convincing herself she had everything under control because I never reacted the way she expected. She mistook my silence for naivety. But I didn't move without a strategy. I didn't strike until I knew I could destroy everything with one precise blow. I heard the car pull into the driveway just before midnight. The slam of the door. The hurried footsteps up the walkway. She was here. I stood in the kitchen, waiting. The door opened. Amanda stepped inside, her coat draped over her arm, her purse held a little too tightly. She saw me immediately, standing by the counter, arms crossed, expression unreadable. She hesitated, but only for a second. Then she slipped into her role. Nicholas, she said softly, setting her things down. Are you seriously not going to talk to me about this? I didn't respond, just watched her, let her feel the weight of the silence. She took a slow breath, then tried again, her voice calm, reasonable. Look, I get it. Those idiots at the party were drunk and running their mouths. But you know that's all it was, right? Just drunken nonsense. She stepped closer, tilting her head slightly, the way she always did when she was trying to coax me into believing her. Still, I said nothing. Her lips pressed together, a flicker of frustration breaking through. Jesus, Nicholas, do you even realize how humiliating that was for me? How it looked, how it made me feel. I almost laughed. How it made her feel. She sighed and rubbed her temples. This is ridiculous. I shouldn't even have to defend myself against something so absurd. I mean, Brian? Seriously? He's a damn intern, for God's sake. And Jason? He's been with the company longer than I have. I don't know why David and Brian thought it would be funny to make up lies, but you and I both know. I did a DNA test. The words cut through the room like a knife. Amanda's mouth snapped shut. Her entire body stiffened, but only for half a second. Then, she let out a forced, breathy laugh. A DNA test? Oh my God, Nicholas. Are you hearing yourself right now? She shook her head, folding her arms. This is insane. Do you really think I would? I tilted my head, watching her unravel. The results will be in soon, I said. And I don't need you to say anything else. Because at this point, I don't care what you have to say. For the first time, she faltered. A flicker of something crossed her face. Something I had never seen before. Fear. And in that moment, I knew. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there, her carefully constructed world starting to crack around her. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. The next morning, I was already awake before Amanda's alarm went off. I had barely slept, but not from stress, just from the sheer weight of what I was about to do. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the heating system kicking in. Outside, the world was still dark, the early morning sky painted in shades of deep blue and gray. Amanda stirred beside me, letting out a soft sigh before blinking awake. She turned, her eyes immediately finding mine. For a split second, I saw uncertainty flash across her face, an expression she rarely allowed herself to show. She knew I wasn't the same man she had left in that room last night. "Morning," she said, voice raspy from sleep. She stretched, then reached out, as if everything was normal, as if she could just pretend this was any other day. I didn't move. Her fingers brushed against my arm, hesitating when she realized I wasn't responding. "Nicholas," she murmured, her voice laced with just the right amount of concern. "Are we really going to do this? You're really going to act like last night wasn't just a misunderstanding?" I finally shifted, sitting up and swinging my legs over the edge of the bed. "Get dressed," I said flatly. "We're leaving in 20 minutes. She blinked. "Leaving? For what?" "The office." She frowned, sitting up. "We don't have to be there this early." I stood, grabbing my clothes from the chair. "We do today." Her frown deepened. "Nicholas, what is this? You're acting." I turned to face her, finally letting some of my cold anger slip through. "I told you last night, I don't care what you have to say. I don't want your explanations. I don't want your justifications. And I don't want to hear another word about how humiliating this is for you." She paled. "Good." Without waiting for another response, I walked out of the room and into the bathroom, closing the door behind me. I didn't need to see her face to know she was scrambling, her mind working overtime to figure out her next move. The drive to the office was silent. Amanda sat stiffly beside me, her hands folded in her lap, her expression carefully neutral. She didn't ask any more questions, but I could feel them radiating off her. She was watching me, studying me, trying to figure out if she could still fix this. She didn't understand yet. This wasn't something she could manipulate her way out of. When we arrived, I parked in my usual spot, shut off the engine, and got out without a word. Amanda followed, her heels clicking against the pavement as she struggled to keep up. Inside, the office was still waking up. Employees arriving, coffee being brewed, the hum of computers coming to life. A normal morning, for now. As we stepped into the elevator, Amanda finally broke. "Nicholas," she said, keeping her voice low, "I don't know what you think you're doing, but whatever this is, it's not going to make you feel better. Dragging this out, making a scene, it's beneath you." I turned my head slightly, just enough to meet her gaze. She wasn't panicked. Not yet. But she was trying to take control again, trying to steer the situation before it spiraled completely out of her hands. "You always think you're the smartest person in the room," don't you? I said, voice quiet, almost amused. That's why you've gotten away with this for so long. A flicker of something crossed her face. Annoyance. Maybe. You're making a mistake. The elevator doors slid open. I stepped out. She didn't follow immediately, because for the first time, Amanda wasn't sure what to do next. At my desk, I opened my laptop, checked my email, and there it was, the confirmation. The DNA test had been received. Results would be ready soon. I leaned back in my chair, fingers tapping against the desk, watching through the glass walls of my office as Amanda walked to hers. She moved carefully, controlled. Jason was already at his desk, looking like a man who had barely slept. Brian, on the other hand, was nowhere to be seen. Coward. It didn't matter, because in just a few hours, the entire company would see exactly who Amanda really was, and there wouldn't be anywhere left for her to hide. The office was buzzing with the usual morning energy. Employees chattering over coffee, keyboards clacking, the low murmur of business calls filling the open workspace. But underneath it all, there was something else. Tension. A quiet hum of anticipation that rippled through the building like an undercurrent. Word had spread from the party. Nobody said anything outright, but I could feel it in the way people glanced at me, in the way conversations hushed when Amanda walked by. The whispers, the knowing looks, it was all bubbling beneath the surface. And that was exactly what I wanted. I sat at my desk, scrolling through the security feeds on my second monitor. Amanda was in her office, pacing. Jason was in a meeting room, pretending to work but checking his phone every few minutes. Brian still hadn't shown up. Coward. I took another sip of coffee and opened my inbox. And there it was. The email from the lab. Your DNA results are ready. My pulse didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. I had been expecting this, had already accepted it the moment Brian opened his mouth at the party. But knowing something and seeing it confirmed in black and white were two different things. I clicked the link, entered my credentials, and scrolled to the results. Paternity probability, 0%. I stared at it for a long moment, not because I was shocked, but because this was the final nail in the coffin. The moment where I officially, without any doubt, crossed the line between knowing and acting. I exhaled slowly, then closed the tab. Time to end this. I stood, adjusting my sleeves as I stepped out of my office. The moment I did, I could feel the shift in the room. Eyes flickered toward me, then away. Conversations dipped into hushed murmurs. Even Jason, who usually carried himself with an air of smug invincibility, stiffened in his chair when he saw me. Good. I walked straight to Amanda's office and pushed the door open without knocking. She looked up, startled. Nicholas. Conference room. Now. Her brows knitted together. What? I didn't repeat myself. I just turned and walked away. I could hear her chair scrape against the floor as she hurried after me. Nicholas, what is this about? She demanded, lowering her voice as we passed other employees. If this is about last night. I didn't acknowledge her. Didn't stop walking. By the time we reached the large glass-walled conference room, Jason was already inside, shifting nervously in his seat. He hadn't expected this, but the moment I walked in with Amanda behind me, his face drained of color. I closed the door behind us and locked it. Amanda crossed her arms. All right, Nicholas, what the hell is going on? I took my time, walking to the head of the long table, where I had set up my laptop earlier. I tapped the keyboard, and the screen on the wall flickered to life. I turned to face them, leaning casually against the table. You lied to me, I said calmly. Both of you. Amanda let out a sharp breath. Are you seriously still on about this? Nicholas, I already told you those guys were drunk, and I clicked the mouse. On the screen, the email with my DNA results appeared. The room went silent. Jason paled. Amanda didn't even blink. She stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, slowly, she looked back at me. This proves nothing, she said smoothly, with the confidence of a woman who had talked her way out of every bad situation she had ever created. There could be a mistake in the lab. I clicked again. A new set of files appeared on the screen. Financial transactions. Thousands of dollars transferred discreetly over the past few years. Hotels. Expensive dinners. Untraceable payments from corporate accounts, hidden under vague expense reports. Jason swallowed hard. I clicked again. Messages. Not just from Amanda's work email, but from her personal account. From an encrypted messaging app she thought was secure. Except she had forgotten who she was married to. I had retrieved everything. Every message. Every conversation. Every detail of her affairs. The ones I had suspected and the ones I hadn't even known about. Jason buried his face in his hands. Amanda, for the first time since this started, faltered. How did you? I own a cybersecurity firm, Amanda, I said coolly. Did you really think you could hide this from me? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her mask was slipping. Good. I turned to Jason, who looked like he was about to be sick. And you, I said, you thought you could keep climbing your way up by screwing the boss's wife? That she would protect you. Jason didn't respond. He just stared at the table, breathing heavily. I straightened, adjusting my cufflinks. You're both fired. Amanda's head snapped up. You can't. I can. I cut in smoothly. And I already have. Security will be escorting you both out of the building in 15 minutes. She looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time I saw it true, undeniable panic. Don't do this, she whispered. Nicholas, please. I stared at her for a long moment. Then I clicked the mouse one final time. The screen changed again, this time showing an email being sent. To every employee in the company. With every file attached. Jason's breath hitched. Amanda let out a quiet, strangled noise. I watched them both. Watched them as their entire world came crashing down in real time. Then I smiled. Happy New Year. And I walked out. The moment I stepped out of the conference room, the office was eerily silent. The usual background noise of ringing phones, keyboards clacking, and casual conversations had vanished. Everyone had received the email. Everyone had seen the evidence. The weight of the exposure hung thick in the air. Employees sat frozen at their desks, some with their mouths slightly open, others staring at their screens in stunned silence. Some looked at Amanda's office, others at Jason's desk. Both now nothing more than crime scenes. Security arrived within minutes. 2 men in black suits, hired specifically for situations like this, stepped into the conference room. I heard Amanda's raised voice before I saw her. No, you don't understand. I need to talk to Nicholas. He's making a mistake. The guards didn't care. They were professionals. One of them took her by the arm, firm but not aggressive. Ma'am, you need to come with us. She turned to me, eyes wild, pleading. Nicholas, don't do this. We can fix this. You can't just. I met her gaze, and for the first time in our entire marriage, I saw it, powerlessness. She had always been the one in control, the one pulling the strings, crafting narratives, twisting reality. But now, her empire had crumbled around her, and there was no one left to save her. You did this to yourself, I said quietly. Her face twisted into something between fury and desperation. You! Jason shoved past her, his face pale and drenched in sweat. He looked ready to vomit. Nicholas, man, please. This is my career. You can't do this to me. I have a family. I tilted my head. A family? That's interesting. His mouth opened, then closed. He had no argument. He had no defense. Just regret. Brian had finally shown up. He stood near the entrance, watching everything unfold, looking like he had just walked into his own funeral. The moment Amanda saw him, her lips curled in disgust. This is your fault, she spat. Brian flinched. Amanda, I didn't. Shut up, she snapped. Just shut up. I almost laughed. Even now, when she had lost everything, her instinct was to blame someone else. The security team escorted them toward the exit, past rows of employees who sat in stunned silence, some pretending to work, others not even bothering to hide their fascination. And then, just as Amanda was being led past my office, she turned back one last time. I loved you, she whispered. It was a last-ditch effort. The final attempt to manipulate me, to make me hesitate, to make me doubt everything I had just done. I smiled. No, Amanda. You loved control. And now, you have none. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I turned away. She was nothing now. I waited until security had fully escorted them out of the building. I waited until the elevator doors shut, sealing their fates. Then, I walked back into my office, shut the door, and sat down at my desk. The silence felt different now. Lighter. I exhaled slowly, rubbing my temples. This was only the beginning. The divorce, the financial cleanup, the personal fallout, it was all ahead of me. But for now I had one. I glanced at my phone. A single text message from an unknown number. "You did good, boss. They deserved worse." I smirked. Some of my employees had been waiting for this. Then, I leaned back in my chair, watching the office through the glass walls. There was work to be done. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the morning settle over me. The office was still in shock, but the silence wouldn't last long. Soon, the whispers would turn into discussions, and by lunch, it would be a full-blown corporate legend. How the CEO of a cybersecurity firm dismantled his cheating wife and her lovers in real time. But that wasn't my concern anymore. Amanda was out of my life. Jason was ruined. Brian had sealed his own fate the moment he opened his mouth at that party. Now it was time to erase every last trace of them. I turned to my laptop and began executing the second phase of my plan. First, lock down every financial asset. Amanda had always been clever about money, but she had forgotten one thing. I had let her play the game while I controlled the rules. Every shared account was frozen. Every credit card linked to my name was canceled. She had no access to my personal funds. No way to drain my resources before the divorce proceedings began. By the time she checked her bank app, she'd realized she had nothing left but her own salary, and as of this morning, that was gone too. Second, destroy her professional reputation. Amanda wasn't just a wife. She was a figure in the company. Respected, admired, trusted. Not anymore. I drafted an internal memo, short and professional. Effective immediately, Amanda, former chief accountant, and Jason, former head of sales, are no longer employed with this company due to serious ethical violations. A full audit is being conducted on all transactions and client interactions related to their tenure. Any employees with relevant information are encouraged to report directly to upper management. We hold ourselves to the highest standards of integrity. The actions of a few do not define us. We move forward. Stronger. I hit send. Within seconds, every employee in the company received it. Amanda's legacy? Erased. Jason's career? Dead. There was no coming back from this. Third, personal cleanup. I pulled out my phone. There were already messages from mutual friends. Some shocked, some supportive, some just looking for gossip. I ignored them all. Instead, I dialed my lawyer. "Nicholas," he answered. "I assume this is about your wife." "Ex-wife," I corrected. "I need to move forward immediately. I want a divorce filed today. No settlements beyond what's legally required." He let out a low whistle. "You don't waste time. She wasted enough of it for both of us." "Understood. I'll have the paperwork ready by this afternoon." I hung up, feeling lighter with every step I took toward the future. And then my phone buzzed. Amanda. Her name flashed across the screen, and for the first time in years, I felt nothing. No love. Disinterest. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. Then I blocked her number. She was done. I stood, grabbing my coat. The office was still murmuring, the weight of the day still sinking in for everyone else. But I wasn't interested in their conversations. I was already thinking about what came next. A new life, a fresh start. And for the first time in years, I had absolutely nothing to hide. By the time I stepped out of the building, the cold January air felt different, crisper, cleaner, like I was finally breathing it in without the weight of deception pressing against my chest. Amanda was gone. Her reign of manipulation, her carefully constructed lies, her ability to twist the truth until it suited her. All of it was over. But I wasn't done yet. This wasn't just about getting rid of her. This was about ensuring she never had the chance to crawl back into my life. As I walked to my car, my phone vibrated again. This time, an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Seconds later, a notification popped up. New voicemail. I smirked. Amanda was predictable. I tapped play. Her voice came through the speaker. Breathless. Frantic. "Nicholas, listen to me. You don't have to do this. You're angry and I get it, but you're making a huge mistake. We can talk about this. We can fix this. I know you still love me." "I know." I stopped the message. shaking my head. She really thought she still had control. I deleted it. Then I opened my contacts, scrolled to my blocked list, and made sure her name was permanently there. She would never reach me again. Back at home, I walked through the front door and shut it behind me, leaning against it for a moment. The house was eerily quiet. I stared around the space Amanda and I had once shared, but it didn't feel like ours anymore. Felt like mine. I stepped into the living room, my eyes landing on the framed photos still sitting on the shelves. Pictures from vacations, holidays, anniversaries. All of them fake. With a deep breath, I grabbed the first one and threw it into the fireplace. Glass shattered. The flames crackled as they licked up the edges of the photo. Then I grabbed another, and another. One by one, I erased her from my home the same way I had erased her from my life. By the time I was done, the fire had swallowed every last trace of her, and I felt nothing, relief. I poured myself a drink and sank into the couch, watching the flames flicker. For the first time in years, my world wasn't built on lies. And that meant one thing: I could finally start living. The fire burned low, the last embers of my past turning to ash. I sat there watching, letting the weight of it all settle. The silence in the house wasn't empty. It was clean. For the first time, I wasn't sharing my space with a liar. Every breath I took felt lighter, as if my lungs had been cleared of years of toxic air. But I wasn't naive enough to think this was the end. Amanda wouldn't just accept defeat. No, she was too arrogant for that. She would try something. A last-ditch effort, a desperate move, a manipulation disguised as remorse. I needed to be ahead of her. I reached for my laptop, opened a secure connection, and began phase 3 of my plan. Amanda was predictable. She wasn't the type to disappear quietly. She had spent years building her image, curating her power within the company, using her influence to her advantage. Now that it was gone, she would do one of 3 things: try to turn people against me, seek legal leverage in the divorce, find a financial safety net. I could already eliminate option 1. She had no credibility left. The email I sent to the company had sealed that. No one was going to defend a woman who had been exposed as an adulteress embezzling fraud. Option 2. Unlikely. She would get nothing from me in the divorce. Our prenup had been airtight, designed to protect my assets. If she tried to fight it, she'd be burning legal fees on a battle she couldn't win. Which left option 3. Money. I logged into my systems and started running background traces. Amanda had always been careful, but I was better. Within minutes, I found exactly what I was looking for: a hidden account, a private stash of money under a shell corporation she had set up 2 years ago. The transfers were small, spread out over time, disguised as minor business expenses. But when you added them up, she had siphoned over $70,000 out of the company and into her personal slush fund. My lips curled into a smirk. She really thought she was untouchable. I clicked a few buttons, pulled up the necessary records, and packaged them into a single encrypted file. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about justice. She had crossed a line. And now, she was about to find out what real consequences looked like. I picked up my phone and dialed. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Detective Reynolds." "It's Nicholas Carter," I said smoothly. "I have something you might want to see." There was a pause. "This about your wife?" "Ex-wife," I corrected. "And yes, I have evidence of corporate fraud, embezzlement, and financial misappropriation. I'd like to file an official report." Another pause, this one heavier. "You sure about this?" he asked. "Because once this goes through, there's no walking it back." I smiled. "That's the idea." By the time I hung up, the wheels were already turning. Amanda thought she had lost everything this morning. She had no idea what was coming next, because by tonight, she wouldn't just be unemployed. She'd be under criminal investigation. I closed my laptop and exhaled slowly, staring at the last remnants of the fire flickering in the fireplace. The air smelled like burnt paper, like the past being purged. But the real fire, the one that would consume Amanda's world, that was only just beginning. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. I already knew who it was. I answered, letting the silence hang. Then her voice, shaking, furious, barely holding it together. "You set me up." I leaned back in my chair, fingers tapping lazily against the armrest. I didn't set you up, Amanda. You did this to yourself. She let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Oh, please. You really think you're a saint in all this? You had this plan from the moment those idiots ran their mouths at the party. I didn't need a plan, I said coolly. You were always going to destroy yourself. All I had to do was give you the right push. Her breathing was uneven, ragged. You think you've won, don't you? I smirked. Amanda, I know I have. There was a pause, a dangerous, charged silence. And then she dropped the act. Her voice turned venomous, sharp like broken glass. You think you can just erase me? Humiliate me? Do you have any idea what you've done? I do, I said simply. I've ended you. She sucked in a breath. This isn't over. I chuckled. It is for you. I hung up. And then, for good measure, I blocked her new number, too. The news broke that afternoon. A discreet little article buried beneath bigger headlines. But it was there. Former corporate accountant under investigation for embezzlement. They hadn't used Amanda's name directly yet, but anyone with half a brain would connect the dots. By evening, the police showed up at her apartment. She tried to talk her way out of it, of course. Tried to play the victim, to twist the narrative, to act like she was being unfairly targeted. But the evidence was undeniable. Bank records, fraudulent transactions, encrypted emails detailing payments to Jason and other expenses. They put her in cuffs. And the best part? It was all caught on camera. Someone in her building filmed the whole thing. Amanda screaming at the officers, demanding a lawyer, insisting it was all a mistake. It went viral. By midnight, half the company had seen it. Jason, as expected, was trying to distance himself from everything. His LinkedIn was wiped, his number disconnected. He was scrambling, but it was too late. His involvement was already out there. And Brian? That idiot went into hiding. Not that it mattered. He was just a footnote in Amanda's downfall. The next morning, I woke up early, took a deep breath, and stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was living in someone else's lie. There was no more second-guessing. No more wondering what was real. Amanda was gone. My life? Mine again. I checked my phone, no new messages. And damn, it sounded good. I stepped outside, the morning air crisp against my skin. The world felt different, not in the way that things had changed overnight, but in the way that I had. For years, I had unknowingly carried the weight of Amanda's deception, dragging it behind me like a rusted chain. But now I was free. The news had spread far beyond the company. Amanda's arrest wasn't just a scandal, it was a spectacle. The video of her screaming at the police had been shared, reshared, analyzed, and mocked across every platform imaginable. The woman who once controlled the narrative had become nothing more than a joke. I walked into the office, and for the first time in days, people weren't whispering about me. They were whispering about her. Eyes flicked toward me as I made my way to my office, but no one spoke. Not out of fear, out of respect. And then, just as I reached my door, one of the younger employees, a junior developer, looked up from his phone and smirked. "Damn, boss," he muttered. "You really ended her." I didn't stop, didn't respond, just smiled. Inside my office, I settled into my chair and opened my laptop. There was one final thing left to do. Amanda still had one last connection to me, her name on my house. That ended today. I had already set things in motion with my lawyer, but I wanted it finalized. I dialed his number. "Nicholas," he answered. "You're up early. I want the house under my name exclusively," I said, skipping the pleasantries. There was a pause. "You're sure? Do it." By the afternoon, it was done. Amanda had nothing left. No job. No money. She would walk out of jail to absolute nothing. That was the real punishment. Not just being caught, not just being exposed, but knowing that everything she had built, every move she made, every manipulation, every game had led to this. A complete and total erasure. That night, I sat on my back patio with a drink in my hand, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. This was my life now, and for the first time in a long time, I actually wanted to live it. I sat on the back patio, the ice in my glass slowly melting as I watched the city stretch out in front of me. The air was still, quiet, except for the distant hum of traffic. It was the first time in years that I had truly felt at peace. Amanda was gone. Not just from my home, not just from my company, but from my life. Her downfall had been swift, brutal, and entirely her own doing. She had played her games for years, weaving lies, manipulating people, controlling narratives. But in the end, she had lost to herself. I had simply let her unravel. My phone buzzed beside me, breaking the silence. A text from my lawyer. Divorce papers officially served. It's done. I let out a slow breath, reading those words again. It's done. The final piece of the puzzle. The last chain snapping free. Amanda would never darken my doorstep again. No more explanations. No more excuses. No more carefully rehearsed performances. She had lost everything. And me? I had gained something far more valuable than revenge. Myself. I stood, stretching, feeling lighter than I had in years. The house was finally mine again. My company was mine again. My life? Mine. As I walked inside, I passed the empty space on the wall where one of our old wedding photos used to hang. I didn't need to replace it. I didn't need any reminders of the past. Because the future? That was all mine now, and I couldn't wait to start living it.
She laughed while zipping up her suitcase. Full on, teeth showing, arrogant laughter. You're being dramatic, Martin. It's just 10 days. Carlo invited me to see his vineyard, meet his sister, tour some ruins. Don't spiral. I didn't spiral. I didn't even blink. I just stood there, in the doorway of our walk-in closet, watching my wife fold lingerie she hadn't worn for me in years. The same pair I'd seen once, untouched in the back of her drawer, tags still on. Now they were the first things in her luggage. She packed like someone running towards something not away. Methodical, smiling, and humming. The morning had started quietly. Too quietly. She hadn't touched her eggs. I noticed because Sienna always ate breakfast, even when we fought. She kept glancing at her phone, screen lighting up every few minutes with WhatsApp pings. I didn't ask. I already knew. It was the way she dressed for breakfast that tipped me off. Silk blouse, makeup at 8 a.m., spritz of perfume so strong I tasted it in my toast. That scent used to mean we had plans together. Now it meant she had secrets. I set my coffee down. If you go to Italy with Carlo, we're done. There. Clean. Like slicing a rope instead of untying the knot. She barely looked up. You'll still be here when I get back. Don't make this into a thing. I waited for a flicker of guilt. None came. Instead, she grabbed her sunglasses and posed in the mirror, smirk and all. God, lighten up. It's not like I'm moving there. No, just sleeping with someone there. I nodded slowly. Enjoy your trip. She paused then. Just a beat. Her eyes narrowed, like she was trying to figure out what I meant. But arrogance is a hell of a drug, and she'd overdosed months ago. That afternoon, while I was sorting out a leaky garden hose, she posted it. A photo of her in front of the terminal, oversized Louis Vuitton behind her, hair done just so, captioned, Rome-bound with the one who really gets me wine glass airplane kiss mark. I stared at it for a long time, not because it hurt. That stage was long gone. I stared because of how comfortable she was making it public. That's when I knew she didn't think I'd do a damn thing. She thought I'd stay in Connecticut, tending to roses and oiling door hinges, while she rode Vespas through Tuscany with a man who used to email me real estate deals. She didn't know about the drawer. The one in my study, second from the bottom, behind 3 dusty architecture journals and a leather-bound notebook with her name engraved on the cover. The one labeled Estate, Draft B. I opened it with calm fingers and the kind of detachment only betrayal can give birth to. Inside, papers. Asset protection mechanisms. Trust amendments. LLC filings. Frozen joint account instructions. All unsigned, but prepared. Months ago. Not because I suspected this, specifically, but because I've always believed in insurance. The divorce lawyer I'd consulted over coffee in Manhattan last year had warned me. People think infidelity is the moment of betrayal. But it's not. That moment already passed. You're just waiting for the paperwork to catch up. I'd nodded. Now the paperwork was ready. I ran my hand across the top folder. There was a light layer of dust on it. She'd never noticed. Sienna didn't touch the office. Didn't even pretend to be interested in how the money worked. The estate planning meetings were too boring. The LLCs, too confusing. She wanted the lifestyle, not the ledger. Perfect. I pulled out the red folder and placed it on my desk. One sheet in particular had yellow highlighted sections and a sticky note in my own handwriting. Use only if she crosses the line. Guess what, sweetheart? You just crossed it. The first photo dropped before her plane even landed. Her phone must have been on Wi-Fi midair. It was a picture of her and Carlo clinking glasses in what looked like first class. Caption: letting go of the past victory handedly. Letting go of the past? Huh? I stared at it from my desk in the study, that red folder opened beside me like a loaded weapon. She was smiling like someone who had never known consequences. Carlo looked like a man who just beat the system. Then came the flood. A carousel post of vineyard sunsets in Chianti, filtered in warm amber hues. Close-ups of truffle pasta dishes captioned spoiled. Then one of their legs entangled on a chaise lounge, a wine glass balanced on her thigh, her left hand conspicuously ringless. The final punch? A mirror selfie in a luxury hotel suite. Her wearing one of his dress shirts, hair messy, mouth open mid-laugh. That one she posted at midnight Rome time. I assume after round 2. My hands didn't tremble. Not anymore. Not even when I zoomed in and confirmed the hotel logo stitched on the bathrobe hanging by the door. Hotel Contessa, Rome. I clicked download. Then forwarded each photo to 2 inboxes. 1. r.connolly@flogrup.com. 2. carter.trust@waldenwealth.co. No subject line. No text. Just the files. No need to explain. I leaned back in my chair. The AC kicked on. Outside, the wind moved through the pines in the backyard like nothing had changed. But something had. Not for her yet. But for me? Everything. I got up, put on a charcoal blazer, one she hated, called it too stiff, too cold, and drove to a part of town she never visited. Industrial, gray, boring. Her words. Not mine. She used to call the building Martin's concrete box. I called it leverage. It had taken me years to move assets into it. Bit by bit. Quietly. Her name was on none of it. She never even stepped foot inside. It was too dull, she said. Too clinical. But I liked that. She never asked questions. And if she had, I would have just said it was from my old design firm, technically true. Now it held something new. The sign outside read, Redline Ventures, LLC. I unlocked the glass doors with a key fob she didn't know existed. Inside was a pristine lobby with modern lighting and bare concrete walls. At the front desk, Elaine smiled like she'd been expecting me. Mr. Keating, she said, standing. Is he in? I asked. She nodded. Garage. I walked through the corridor past the conference room, past the blueprint archive she never cared to explore, down to the private garage. It smelled like gasoline and new rubber. And there it was, still under the custom silk cover. The Ferrari. Rosso Corsa red. My fingers gripped the edge of the fabric. I didn't pull it off yet. Not yet. This wasn't for me. Not really. It was a message. A blood-colored punctuation mark I would park in her spot like a period at the end of a sentence she didn't even know she'd written. I turned to Carter, who was standing in the corner by the tool chest, sipping espresso like this was just another Tuesday. She's in Rome, I said. With him. He gave a low whistle. Ballsy. Reckless, I corrected. You want to move the car this week? I shook my head. Not yet. I'll tell you when. Just make sure it's detailed and fully insured. He nodded. As I left, I took one last look at the shape beneath the silk. Sleek. Sharp. Merciless. The opposite of everything she expected from me. The perfect symbol of what comes next. The call to the trust manager lasted exactly 7 minutes and 49 seconds. I timed it. Not because I was in a rush, but because precision matters when you're dismantling a life with surgical calm. Mr. Keating, Thomas said, voice smooth, professional. To confirm, you're executing the substitution of primary beneficiary on both instruments. Correct. And Mrs. Keating is to be fully removed? I glanced out the window. A storm was moving in across the ridge, dark clouds piling up like a silent witness. She was never really in, I replied. Click. Done. Sienna never cared about the trust. She thought the money was in a pile somewhere, accessible like a checking account. She didn't understand how wealth works, how the real rich protect themselves behind walls of paper and time and signatures. She liked the idea of being married to someone with legacy, but she never respected the architecture of it. And architecture has always been my domain. Next step, the house. The colonial she decorated, but never paid attention to beyond paint swatches and throw pillows. She called it my canvas. I called it a 2.1M liability with 3.4M in equity. One email to the estate attorney. Subject line: transfer into RK Property Holdings LLC, revocable. The reply came 15 minutes later with a DocuSign link and a quiet nod in the form of a thumbs-up emoji. The deed was done by sundown. Then came the joint account, the one she used for weekly spa treatments, wine deliveries, and that emergency shopping trip in New York that racked up $6,300 in dresses she wore once, maybe. I logged in from my encrypted laptop, the one she never knew existed. Two-factor authentication. Key fob approval. Click. Freeze joint account. Mutual consent not required. Clause 7C2. A legal time bomb we'd agreed on back in 2012 when I'd helped her cover her brother's gambling debt. She called me paranoid back then. I called it foresight. I didn't smile as the screen refreshed to access restricted. Not because it didn't feel satisfying, but because this wasn't about joy. It was about gravity. And gravity doesn't smile. It pulls. Once everything was set in motion, I poured myself a glass of rye. Not to celebrate, just to mark the moment. I drank it by the window while her Rome updates rolled in. Another photo of her in a flowing dress at the Trevi Fountain, arms outstretched, caption: wish made crescent moon sparkles. Mine too. I sent a single text. Not to her, but to someone who mattered more now. Me. Ready for Rome to end? The reply came 10 seconds later. Her. Born ready. Then, I clicked on the tab marked Ferrari Portofino M, confirm delivery. Drop-off address. Our home. Delivery date, Friday. Time, 3 p.m. Instructions: park in front of garage. Leave keys with homeowner. Do not engage with other parties. That space used to belong to Sienna's Lexus. Now it would belong to something faster, louder, and far less forgiving. Just like me. It came in the middle of the night, 2:14 a.m., as I was reviewing the third version of the condo severance agreement. Julia, Mom posted a pic with Carlo. Is this real? The kind of text you don't just read, you feel it land. Like something brittle cracking in your chest. She hadn't called me Dad in 3 months. Not since the last Thanksgiving, when Sienna turned our dining room into a stage and performed a full-blown monologue about aging men and emotional stagnation in front of Julia and her boyfriend. I stayed silent through the entire performance. Julia hadn't known where to stand after that, between loyalty and logic. Until now. I stared at the text longer than I should have. The photo she was referencing had gone viral within our little pocket of New England society. Carlo had one arm around Sienna at a rooftop bar in Trastevere. The caption read, "Real wine. Real connection." The word real did some heavy lifting. I responded without punctuation. Me, it is. There was no ellipsis in her reply. No delay. It came fast. Julia, what do you need me to do? The screen glowed like a flare in the dark. She was in. Julia had always been sharp. Too sharp, maybe. She didn't buy into the Botox and brunch culture her mother swam in. She once told me at age 15, Mom's friends talk like their lives are reality shows with better lighting. At the time, I chalked it up to teenage snark. Turns out it was prophecy. I typed back slowly, deliberately. Me, be there when she falls. Silence. Then a reply that I didn't expect, but should have. Julia, she already has. Just doesn't know it yet. I set the phone down and exhaled. For the first time in weeks, I felt something unfamiliar crawling up my spine. Not relief. Not revenge. Alignment. I thought back to her high school graduation. Sienna showed up late, tipsy, wearing sunglasses indoors. Julia tried not to cry when she looked at the empty seat next to mine, her mother's seat. After the ceremony, Sienna pretended nothing happened. I never said a word. I thought keeping the peace was the right thing. I was wrong. Julia remembered. That morning, I called her. She picked up on the first ring. "You're sure about this?" she asked. "She left first," I said. She didn't argue. "Then I'll handle the social fallout. She's already posting like a manic influencer. I'll make sure people know you're not the one who cracked." I was quiet for a beat. "You don't have to get involved." "Yes, I do," she said. She always told me to pick winners. She forgot who taught me how to recognize one. Later that day, Julia stopped by the house. She brought coffee, wore her old brown university sweatshirt, and looked tired, but resolved. We sat on the back porch, where Sienna used to host her rose-soaked book clubs, books she never actually read. Julia pulled out a folder from her tote. Inside, printed screenshots, timestamps, captions, comment threads. She's not just in Rome with him. She's broadcasting it like a rebrand, Julia said. And the comments are getting brutal. People think she's having a midlife breakdown. She is, I said flatly. She's going to weaponize it when she gets back, Julia warned. She'll say you were controlling, that you shut her out emotionally, that you manipulated the finances. I nodded. Let her. Julia leaned back, looking at the garden. This house always looked better when you were the one watering it. That sentence landed harder than anything Sienna had said in a year. Before she left, she paused at the front door. When she realizes what's waiting for her, she's going to scream. I gave her the faintest smile. Just be there to help her echo. Father and daughter. One rebuilding, one remembering. Both done pretending. She was flying over the Atlantic when I changed the locks. Delta Flight 2413 from Rome to JFK, wheels up at 9:20 a.m. local time. I knew because I tracked it. Not through some spy app or shady hack, just the airline's own site. Public data. Transparent. Like the life she thought she was living. While she settled into her business class pod, probably sipping Prosecco and scrolling through her curated feed of compliments, I was in the foyer with a locksmith named Brandon. Deadbolt 2? He asked, already unscrewing the hardware. All of it, I said. Front, side, garage. Change the pins, swap the codes. I want nothing in this house that responds to her. He didn't ask questions. Professionals like Brandon know when to keep their mouths shut. But I saw the glance, half curiosity, half pity. He recognized the tone, the stillness. The kind men have when they're past rage, past grief. When they've already buried the old life in a grave-marked marriage and are just sealing the coffin. By the time she was halfway over the Azores, I'd finished redirecting the mail. Everything, credit cards, beauty boxes, the overpriced wine club she never drank from, now rerouted to my P.O. box. The P.O. clerk, a man named Ray, asked if I wanted to notify the other party listed. No need, I said. She'll find out. Back home, I opened the liquor cabinet. The wine she brought back from Sonoma 2 years ago, still unopened. I poured myself a glass and walked to the hallway, where I laid out a small black box. It had once held her favorite cuff bracelet, the one I gave her on our 10th anniversary. She wore it like a badge until Carlo slithered back into her life. Now, it held something else, her house key. The old one. Next to it, a handwritten note on thick cream stationery. Decisions have consequences. I signed it. Full name. Legal clarity. Then I walked into the kitchen and opened the dishwasher. 2 wine glasses sat on the top rack. I pulled one out, dried it carefully, and slid it into the cabinet above the stove. The other stayed. I wanted her to notice. 1 glass short. 1 seat unfilled. 1 name gone from the trust. I pulled up the surveillance footage on the living room monitor. It was more for me than for safety. She hadn't been home in 10 days, but I still watched. I reviewed the moment before she left, heels clicking across hardwood, her suitcase bumping into the door frame. She hadn't looked back. Not once. She'd walked out like someone who believed her absence would sting. It didn't. It clarified. I tapped the timeline forward, scanning for any movement while I'd been out. Nothing. Stillness. A waiting battlefield. Upstairs, I closed the closet door that now had empty hangers on one side. I'd left them there on purpose. Not for her clothes. For the echo. On her nightstand, I'd placed a folded copy of her favorite magazine, open to an article she'd tagged months ago, Reinvention After 50. A highlighter line cut through one sentence in neon yellow. Sometimes, freedom means losing what you never valued in the first place. That one wasn't for the public. It was for her. I checked the Ferrari's delivery confirmation, scheduled for 2:50 p.m., just after her estimated arrival at the house. Right into her parking spot. The timing would be perfect. By the time her plane taxied to the gate and she smiled into the customs officer's face, still believing her life was intact, the chessboard had already been flipped. The king removed. The queen exposed. The game over. And when she walked through the front gate, she'd find a door that didn't know her, a box with a key that didn't fit, and a silence sharp enough to slice open everything she pretended not to feel. I placed the last wine glass back into the cabinet. One short. Deliberately. The black Escalade eased up the driveway like a funeral procession arriving late. She was in the back seat. I could see her outline, sunglasses on, hair in a loose bun, the way she wore it when she wanted to look effortlessly important. There was a delay. She didn't step out right away. I imagined she was finishing a text, or more likely, rehearsing some smug remark she planned to drop on me the moment she walked in. Something vaguely superior, glazed in passive aggression. But then she saw it. The Ferrari. Bright, venom red, parked exactly where her pearl-white Lexus used to sit. She didn't move. Not for a full 15 seconds. The driver tapped the brakes like he was confused whether to idle or back out. He looked over his shoulder, trying to figure out if he'd taken the wrong turn. He hadn't. She finally stepped out, heels first, designer tote slung over one shoulder. I stepped through the front door with perfect timing, like an actor hitting his mark. I wasn't alone. Beside me stood Emily, Julia's old roommate. 28. Smart. Subtle. The kind of woman who didn't need to announce herself with emojis or filtered selfies. She wore a simple black dress and no makeup, her natural face more disarming than anything Sienna had curated in the last 5 years. My hand found Emily's. Not forced. Just natural. Then I did something I hadn't done in decades. I tossed a set of keys. Not to Sienna. To Emily. Ferrari keys. Matte black fob. The sound they made landing in her palm was small, but deafening. Sienna's jaw unhinged just enough to betray her shock. Her voice cracked in that familiar register she used when control was slipping. Where's my car? I smiled without warmth. Gone, I said. Like my patience. She blinked. Her eyes scanned the driveway, as if the Lexus might reappear if she looked hard enough. Then they flicked to Emily. Recognition. Then calculation. I could see her trying to place her, figure out how much this would sting in the optics department. She failed. Emily gave her a polite nod. Nothing more. Are you insane? Sienna hissed, stepping forward like she still had rights here. This is a joke, right? What is she doing here? I tilted my head. You were in Rome with a man who sells wine out of his cousin's shed. I was here making room. Her face went a shade paler. I thought you said we were over, she spat. I nodded. You did. The day you posted it. She shook her head slowly, as if trying to reboot a reality that was already deleted. I lived here. You visited, I corrected. Emily remained still. Regal, even. Her silence felt louder than Sienna's anger. Sienna gestured wildly at the house. What the hell is going on? This is still L. I stepped forward, cutting the air with calm. This house belongs to RK Property Holdings, LLC. Check the records. I'd offer you a tour, but you're not on the guest list anymore. The Escalade driver rolled his window down halfway, eyeing the scene like it was a drama unfolding at a stoplight. I almost waved him to stick around. Act 2 is coming. Sienna stared at the front door like it might open for her by force of memory. Then her gaze fell back to the Ferrari. The shine of the hood. The absence of her car. The reality settling in. She said nothing. Because finally, she understood. Not only was she locked out, she'd been replaced. And she'd been outplayed. Sienna stormed up the porch steps like she still belonged to the air between those walls. She was trying to summon some version of the past where doors opened for her simply because she willed it. She reached into her handbag, pulled out her old house key, and shoved it into the lock. Nothing. She jiggled it. Tried again. Harder. Click. No give. She yanked the knob. Once, twice. Then she stepped back, stared at the door like it had just called her by someone else's name. Inside, Emily and I had already passed through the kitchen, out of view. I watched her on the front porch via the hallway Nest monitor. Her movements were fast, erratic. A woman realizing, truly realizing, that her status had expired. She banged the door with the side of her fist. Martin, she barked. This isn't funny. The house didn't respond. Open the door. Open the goddamn door. I didn't. Emily was already pouring a glass of wine. She handed me one. Neither of us said a word. Outside, Sienna tried again. The sound of metal grinding on metal, the echo of a woman not accustomed to being ignored. Then a new sound interrupted her tantrum. Footsteps. Old Harold, our neighbor of 14 years, crossed the lawn with his hands in his jacket pockets. He wasn't in a rush. Just slow, deliberate steps like someone delivering a message he didn't want to speak aloud. Sienna turned to him, breath caught in her throat. He stopped a few feet away and held out a manila envelope. "I was asked to give this to you when you got back," he said plainly. His voice was flat. No sympathy, just a man fulfilling a task. She hesitated. "What is it?" "I didn't open it," he replied. "But I reckon it's got answers." She took the envelope like it might be rigged to explode. Her hands were shaking now, more from disbelief than cold. Her sunglasses were off, and her eyes were finally exposed. Bloodshot, frantic, and suddenly afraid. She ripped the flap open right there on the porch. Inside, 2 crisp sheets of paper. Letterhead from Fenwick and Wallace LLP. Top line: revocation and asset separation, immediate enforcement. I'd reviewed the wording myself before it went out. Clean, brutal, legal poetry. It explained everything in terms even she couldn't misinterpret. Her beneficiary status, revoked. Access to marital assets, terminated. Shared property, reclassified under LLC protections. Mail forwarding, confirmed. All financial ties, severed. Page 2 was notarized and included the list of personal items to be boxed and picked up at a later time under supervised conditions. Nothing over $500 in value. Nothing she didn't bring into the marriage herself. Sienna read it once. Then again. She looked up at Harold. "Is this real?" she asked, voice now small. He didn't blink. "Looks real to me." I watched her fold the papers slowly, as if folding them might somehow undo the truth printed on them. She stood there on the porch, surrounded by the life she used to command, and none of it moved for her. The door didn't open. The windows didn't blink. The driveway mocked her with its perfect red Ferrari. Inside, Emily leaned against the counter and whispered, "She's going to lose it." "She already did," I replied. Outside, Sienna took a shaky breath, looked at the door one last time, and then sat down on the steps, like someone waiting for a bus that would never come. The house behind her stood silent, just as I'd designed it. She must have thought the bank would be her lifeline, some desperate sliver of normalcy she could cling to while the rest of her world spun out of orbit. She walked into the Fairfield branch wearing oversized sunglasses and a trench coat she hadn't worn since our last vacation in Charleston, probably to give the illusion of composure. But her hands betrayed her, twitchy, fidgety fingers gripping her wallet too tight. The teller smiled, innocently unaware she was about to step into a mess. "Hi there. How can I help you today?" Sienna pulled out her platinum debit card like a knight drawing a sword. "I'd like to withdraw $2,500. Swipe. Beep. Pause. The teller frowned. "I'm sorry, ma'am. It's coming back as restricted. Do you have another form of payment?" Sienna blinked. "Excuse me." The girl turned the monitor slightly, just enough for Sienna to see the message. "Account frozen. Joint access revoked. See account holder for details." "Is this some kind of mistake?" she asked, the sharpness creeping back into her voice. "I can't access further details," the teller said apologetically. "You'd need to speak with one of our private account managers. Would you like me to schedule?" "I am the account holder," Sienna snapped. "According to our records," the teller said, keeping her voice even, "you're a former secondary on a joint account. Primary authorization was revoked last week." Sienna didn't hear the rest. She was already turning on her heel and heading toward the glass door, muttering something that sounded like "he can't do this," but with far less certainty than she intended. She didn't go home. She went to the luxury condo we'd leased 3 years ago, the one near her Pilates studio, where she occasionally stayed when she needed space. Space to breathe, to think, to pretend she was the misunderstood protagonist in her own little French film. The front desk manager, Daryl, spotted her as she breezed in, heels clacking against marble tile. "I need a keycard. Mine isn't working." Daryl checked the system, his brow furrowed. "Sorry, Mrs. Keating, you're not listed on the active lease." Sienna stared. "What are you talking about?" "I live here." Daryl offered a polite but firm shrug. "The current lease is under RK Property Holdings LLC. Only one authorized occupant, Martin Keating." She didn't speak. She just stood there, silent. Her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides. The desperation had finally begun to seep through the seams of her curated image. The receptionist glanced up from her desk, unsure if she should call security or a therapist. Sienna turned without another word and walked out. Shoulders square, chin high, but even her stilettos couldn't mask the sound of defeat echoing behind her. By 9 p.m., she checked into the Fairfield Inn and Suites off Route 8. She used her backup credit card, one that, by some miracle, still worked. Probably because I hadn't flagged it yet. She got a double bedroom, overlooking the parking lot. No room service, no luxury robes, no French films, just the soft hum of the vending machine down the hall and a neon exit sign that flickered every few seconds like a dying heartbeat. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone. No missed calls, no new messages, just likes and heart emojis on her older Rome posts. She hadn't deleted them yet. She wouldn't. Not until she found someone else to believe her story. Outside, the world kept spinning. And back at the house, the Ferrari glinted under the street lamp, immaculate and untouched, parked in the exact spot where she used to feel untouchable. The shine didn't fade, but hers did. The restaurant was quiet, one of those places with pressed linen, low ceilings, and enough candlelight to make uncomfortable truths look romantic. Julia picked it. Neutral ground. Familiar. The same spot we used to take her for celebration dinners, straight A's, graduations, her first job offer. Now, it would serve a different kind of closure. Sienna arrived fashionably late, of course. She always made an entrance like someone stepping into a stage light. Trench coat on, lips painted, and just enough under-eye concealer to cover the motel fatigue. She spotted Julia first, offered a tight, performative smile. Then she saw me. Her smile died mid-step. "You said lunch," she hissed through clenched teeth, sliding into the booth with her purse clutched like a shield. "You didn't say he'd be here." Julia didn't blink. "I didn't say anything. You just assumed this would be about you." A waiter approached, sensing tension, and wisely decided to give us water and retreat. I said nothing, just reached into the leather folder beside me and placed a stack of paper on the table between us. Photos. Not from me, but from her. Her own damn feed. Screenshots of every sun-drenched selfie, every glass of wine she shared with Carlo, every new beginning caption punctuated with emojis. The hotel suite. The bathrobe shot. The one she thought she had deleted from her story before I saw it. Didn't matter. Screenshots live forever. Sienna stared at the pile. "This is pathetic," she muttered. I placed a second stack beside it. Notarized. Stamped. Sealed. Asset reassignment and beneficiary realignment. Her name nowhere. Her fingerprint erased. She didn't touch the papers, but her fingers twitched like they wanted to rip something apart, either the documents or my face. "You can't erase me like this," she said. "You erased yourself," I replied. That's when she cracked. The performance ended. She lunged forward, both hands flat on the table. "You're manipulating her," she spat, turning to Julia. "He's always done this. Making everything about money. Contracts. Ownership. He controls things. He controls people." Julia didn't flinch. She just pulled out her phone. "No, Mom," she said softly. "You let someone else control you." She tapped play on a saved voicemail. Carlo's voice filled the space, oozing smugness. The background noise sounded like a rooftop party. "Nah, she's not the goal, man. Martin's the one with the land deals. You get in through her. You get to the guy. I'm not looking to retire in love. I'm looking to retire early. You feel me?" Sienna went pale. Her eyes darted from the phone to Julia, to me, back to the papers. You recorded that?" she whispered. Julia's voice was calm. "He left it on my voicemail by accident. Thought he was talking to someone else. That's who you went to Italy with, Mom. Not a soulmate. Just a shortcut." For a moment, Sienna looked less like a villain and more like a very tired woman who'd realized the con too late. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her hands dropped from the table. The weight of embarrassment hit harder than the betrayal. Because betrayal you can hide. Humiliation that lives in your skin. I slid the final paper across the table, a simple spreadsheet showing every transaction from our joint account over the last 12 months. Spa retreats, flight upgrades, wine club memberships, transfers to a Venice boutique hotel under Carlo's name. "Don't worry," I said. The accountant's already flagged the taxable gifts. You'll be hearing from the IRS, not me. She didn't respond. Julia stood. Lunch is over. Sienna didn't move. She just sat there, lips parted slightly, mascara threatening to run, staring down at her own selfies as if they belonged to someone else. Someone wealthier. Someone loved. But that woman didn't exist. She was just a story she told herself. And today, the story ended. She was already there when I opened the door, sitting on the curb like discarded luggage. Not her usual performative pose, not the kind of spontaneous suffering she used to weaponize on Instagram stories. No sunglasses, no designer coat this time. Just a wrinkled blouse, sweat-lined underarms, and a vacant stare pointed at the gutter. Her suitcase sat beside her. Not the sleek Rimawa she flaunted on her Rome trip. No, this one was old. Faded maroon. A cheap roller bag she'd once called tragic when her sister used it for a weekend getaway. Now it held what was left of her illusions. I stepped onto the porch. The Ferrari behind me let out a soft mechanical tick, cooling from its morning drive. She looked up, eyes bloodshot, mouth tight. The confidence, the venom, it was gone. All that remained was a bitter residue. Regret trying to wear mascara. I didn't speak right away, just walked down the steps and handed her an envelope. She didn't reach for it, so I placed it gently on the concrete beside her knee. Refund, I said. Your Italy flight. Down to the cent. That got a blink. She picked it up, turned it over like she didn't trust it not to bite. Her mouth opened like she might say something. Thank you. Maybe, or you didn't have to, but nothing came out. And this, I continued, tilting my head toward the red machine gleaming in the driveway, is staying. Her eyes flicked to the car, then back to me. She actually appreciates it. A flicker of understanding registered. Not anger, not shock, something more hollow. Recognition. I watched her nod, just barely. Then I turned, walked back toward the door that once opened for her like a stage curtain. I didn't slam it. Didn't need to. I simply stepped inside and let it close. The lock clicked behind me, clean and final. No yelling, no weeping, no show for the neighbors. Just silence. Outside, she didn't knock. She just sat. On the curb, where people wait for rides to places they don't own anymore.